Section 78 of the Divine Comedy by Dante Alighieri, translated by Courtney Langdon. This, the Brivox recording, is in the public domain. Paradiso, Canto 11. The Fourth Heaven. The Sun. Intellectual Happiness. The Spirits of Theologians and Philosophers. St. Francis.
O foolish care of mortal men, how full of fallacies the syllogisms, which cause thee over a nether course to beat thy wings. One given to legal learning went his way, one medicine, the priesthood one pursued, and lordship one by force or sophistry. One practised theft, and public business one. One in the pleasures of the flesh involved was growing weary, one to idleness and ease was giving up his life, while I, from all these things set free, was up in heaven with Beatrice so gloriously received. When each had to the point returned again, where in the ring he was before, he stayed there, still as a candle in a candlestick. And I within the light which had before addressed me, heard one smilingly begin, as more and more resplendent it became.
As with its radiance I am shining here, so I, by gazing at the eternal light, learn whence thou takest occasion for thy thoughts. In doubt, thou wouldst that I repeat, in words so clear and so distinct that they will suit thine understanding, that late speech of mine, wherein I said, whereon one thriveth well, and where I said, no second hath arisen. For clearly must one needs distinguish here the providence, which with that counsel rules the world, whereby, before it reach the bottom, every created sight is overcome, in order that the bride of him, who cried aloud, and spoused her with his blessed blood, might go toward her delight, safe in herself, and unto him more faithful too, ordained in her behalf 2 princes, who should serve as guides to her, on this side and on that. One in his burning love was all seraphic, the other, by his wisdom, was on earth a splendour of cherubic light. I'll speak of one of them, for both are spoken of, when one is praised, whichever one be taken, for to the same end were the deeds of both. Between Tupino and the stream that flows adown the hill which blessed Ubaldo chose, a lofty mountain's fertile slope impends, from which Perugia feels at Portasole both cold and heat, while, for their heavy yoke, behind it Gualdo and Nocera weep. Out of this hillside, where it breaketh most its steepness, to the world a son was born, as out of Ganges this one is at times. Therefore let him who talks about that place not say Ashese, which were not enough, but Orient say, if he would rightly speak. Not distant from his rising was he yet, when he began to cause the world to feel somewhat encouraged by his wondrous virtue. For, still a youth, he strove against his father, for such a lady's sake, that unto her as unto death none opened pleasure's door. And then, before his church's legal court, and in his father's presence, joined himself to her, and ever after, day by day, loved her the more intensely. She, bereft of her first husband, slighted and scorned, remained unwooed 1100 years and more till that one came, nor aught availed to hear, that he, whom all the world was fearing, found her undaunted, with Amyclus by his voice, nor aught her being so unmoved and firm, that even when Mary stayed beneath it, she went up with Christ upon the cross. But now, lest in my long talk I proceed too darkly. Take Poverty and Francis as these lovers. Their concord and their joyful countenance caused wonder, love, and gentle looks to end in others' holy thoughts, and so much so that venerable Bernard was the first to bear his feet and run behind such peace, and, running, feel that he was slow of foot. O wealth unrealized, O fertile goodness! Egidio bears his feet, Sylvester his, behind the groom, so pleasing is the bride. That father then and master went his way with both his lady and that family, which now was girding on the humble cord, nor let base-heartedness weigh down his brow for being Peter Bernardone's son, nor yet for seeming so contemptible to others, but revealed his stern resolve to innocent with royal dignity, and won from him his order's primal seal. When Poverty's beloved followers had grown behind the man whose wondrous life would in the glory of heaven be better sung, the holy purpose of this head of flocks was through Honorius by the Holy Spirit crowned with a second crown. Thereafter, when by reason of his thirst for martyrdom, Christ and the rest, his followers, he had preached before the haughty Sultan, and on finding his folk too restive to conversion, not to stay in vain, returned to pick the fruit of Latin fields, among the savage rocks which 'tween the Tiber and the Arno rise, he took from Christ himself the final seal, which on his limbs he bore for 2 whole years, when him it pleased, who granted him such weal, to draw him up to that reward which he, by making himself lowly, had deserved, to his own brethren, as to rightful heirs, he recommended his most precious lady, and ordered them to love her faithfully. Then from her bosom his illustrious soul willed to depart, and to its realm returned, and for its body wished no other buyer. Think now what he was, who, as his companion, was worthy deemed to keep the bark of Peter true to its course when sailing on the deep. That was our patriarch. Thou hence canst see that he who follows him as he commands loadeth his vessel with good merchandise. And yet his flock, so greedy for new food, hath grown, that it can hardly fail to scatter through various wood and mountain pasture lands, and hence the more his sheep like vagabonds wander away and further go from him, emptier of milk do they regain the fold. Yet surely some there are, who, dreading harm, cling to their shepherd. But so few are these, that little cloth will furnish them with cowls. If now my words have not been indistinct, and if thy hearing hath attentive been, and thou recall to mind what I have said, partly contented will thy wishes be, because thou'lt see the plant whence hewn they are, and what the limitation means, whereon one thriveth well, if one go not astray.
End of Paradiso Canto 11. Section 79 of the Divine Comedy by Dante Alighieri, translated by Courtney Langdon. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Paradiso Canto 12. The Fourth Heaven. The Sun. Intellectual Happiness. The Spirits of Theologians and Philosophers. Saint Dominic.
As soon as e'er the blessed flame had voiced its final word, the holy wheel began to whirl, and in its circling had not moved around completely, ere another wheel enclosed it in a ring, and each to each matched with its own its motions and its songs. Songs which, in those sweet pipes, as far surpass our muses and our sirens, as a primal splendour surpasses one reflected from it. As when, both parallel and like in hue, two rainbows o'er a tender cloud are drawn, when Juno issues orders to her maid, the outer being from the inner born, as is the speaking of that wandering nymph whom love consumed, as mists are by the sun. And cause folk here, by reason of the pact which God with Noah made, to prophesy about the world, that it will not again be flooded. So of those eternal roses the two wreaths turned around us there, and so the outer with the inmost harmonized. After the dance and great high feast of song, and flaming interplay of light with light, in joyful happiness and tender love, had of a sudden and with one accord grown quiet, even as eyes do, which must close and open at the will of what attracts them. Out of the heart of one of those new lights a voice came forth, as to its where I turned, which made me seem a needle to its star. And it began,
"The love which lends me beauty draws me to talk about that other leader, for whose sake mine is so well talked of here. Where one is, right it is to introduce the other, so that, since they fought together, their glories likewise may together shine. Christ's host, which cost so much to arm anew, was slowly, timidly, and small in numbers moving behind its standard, when the emperor, whoever reigns, provided of his grace alone for his endangered host, and not because of its deserts, and helped his bride, as it hath here been said, with champions twain, through whom, because of what they did and said, the people who had strayed away returned. In those parts where sweet Zephyr's breezes rise to open springtime's foliage, wherewithal Europe is seen to clothe herself again, not very distant from the beating waves, behind which, through his long career, the sun conceals himself at times from every one. Fortunate Caloroga hath her seat, guarded by that great shield, in which the lion both subjugates and is subdued. Therein the amorous lover of the Christian faith was born, the holy athlete, well disposed toward those he loved, and toward his foes severe. And even at its creation was his mind with such live virtue filled, that in his mother it caused her to become a prophetess. After the spousal tween the faith and him had at the sacred font been held, where each with mutual health had dowered each, the lady who answered for him in a dream beheld the wondrous fruit that was to come from him and from his heirs. And that he might by name be what he was, a spirit went from hence, to give him the possessive of the one who wholly owned him. Dominic he was called, and of him as the husbandman I speak, whom Christ to help him in his garden chose. He truly seemed Christ's messenger and servant, because the first love which appeared in him was for the primal counsel given by Christ. Often was he discovered by his nurse lying awake and silent on the ground, as if he meant thereby, I came for this. Oh, Felix, of a truth his father was. Oh, truly Joan his mother, if it mean what it is said to, when interpreted. Not for the world's sake for which men now toil, following the men of Ostia and Taddeo, but for the love of spirit food. So great a teacher did he shortly make himself, that he began to go about the vineyard, which withers soon, if idle be the vintner. And of the chair, which to the righteous poor was formerly more kind, not through its own, but through the fault of him who, sitting there, degenerates, he asked not for the right to give, or 2 or 3 for 6, nor yet the income of the earliest vacancy, nor even the tithes which to God's poor belong, but leave to fight against the erring world for that seed's sake, whereof plants 24 are girding thee. With doctrine thereupon and will to apostolic sanction joined, he started like a torrent by a high source urged, and on all stalks heretical his onset smote. And ever there most strongly, where strongest the resistance was. From him there afterward flowed diverse streams, wherewith the garden Catholic is watered so, that all the fresher are its tender shrubs. If such was one wheel of the car, whereby the Holy Church, herself defending, won the civil struggle in her own domain, the other's excellence should certainly be very plain to thee, concerning whom Thomas so courteous was ere I appeared. And yet the rut, formed by the highest part of its circumference, so forsaken is, that there where crust was now is mould. His household, which started out aright, and kept their feet upon his footprints, hath so turned around, that that which is in front now treads on what was once behind. And this will soon be seen by the bad culture's harvest, when the tares will of their loss of granaries complain. And yet I say that one who page by page should search our book would still some paper find where he could read, "What I was wont to be, I am." But from Casale he'll not come, nor yet from Acquasparta, whence such men approach the rule that one evades and one contracts its scope. Bonaventura's life am I, of Bagnoregio, who in great positions set sinister cares behind. Here are Illuminato and Augustine, who were among the first barefooted poor, and, corded, made themselves the friends of God. Hugh of St. Victor here among them is, and Peter Mangiador, and Peter of Spain, who in a dozen books still shines on earth. Nathan the prophet, and Metropolitan Chrysostom, Anselm, aye, and that Donatus, who to the first art deigned to set his hand. Rabban is here, and at my side is shining the abbot of Calabria, Joachim, who with prophetic spirit was endowed. The flaming courtesy of Brother Thomas and his discerning speech have moved me thus.
Section 80 of the Divine Comedy by Dante Alighieri, translated by Courtney Langdon. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Paradiso Canto 13, the Fourth Heaven, the Sun, Intellectual Happiness, the Spirits of Theologians and Philosophers, Solomon's Wisdom.
Let him imagine who would understand aright what now I saw, and let him hold the image like a steadfast rock, the while I speak. The 15 stars which vivify the sky at different points with such clear light that vanquished is all denseness in the air. Let him imagine next that wane, whereto the bosom of our sky suffices so both night and day, that, as its pole revolves, it never disappears. And let him then imagine furthermore that trumpet's mouth, which at the axle's point begins, whereon the first wheel turns, and that all these had made 2 constellations of themselves, like that which Minos' daughter fashioned when she felt the cold of death, and one to have its rays within the other, and both to so revolve, that one moved forward and the other back. And he will of the actual constellation a shadow have, and of the double dance, which circled round the place where I then was. For it as far surpasses our experience, as swifter than the Chiana moves the heaven which outspeeds all the others. There they praised nor Bacchus nor Apollo, but 3 persons in one sole nature, the divine, and that in but one person with the human joined. The song and dance completed each its measure, whereat those holy lights gave heed to us, rejoicing thus to pass from care to care. And then the light, wherein the wondrous life of God's dear pauper had been told to me. Of those harmonious gods the silence broke, and said,
Whereas one straw has now been threshed, and as its seed hath now been stored away. Sweet love inviteth me to beat the other. Thou think'st that in the breast from which the rib was drawn, which went to form the lovely cheek, whose palate cost so much to all the world, and that in that one which, before and after the lance had pierced it, made such satisfaction as to outweigh all sins. Whatever light our human nature is allowed, the whole was by that power infused which made them both. Thou hence art marvelling at what above I said, when I narrated that the good enclosed within the fifth light had no second. Ope now thine eyes to what I answer thee, and thou'lt see that my words and thy belief grow one in truth, as in a ring its centre. That which dies not, and that which mortal is, are naught but that idea's reflected light, to which our sire by loving giveth birth. For that bright light, which from its lucent source so flows that it is not divided from him, nor from the love which with them is entwined, out of its goodness gathers up its radiance, mirrored, as 'twere, in 9 subsistences, itself eternally remaining one. Thence to the lowest creatures it descends from act to act, and such becomes, that naught it makes but brief contingencies. And these contingencies I understand to be those generated things the moving heavens produce by means of seed and without seed. Of these the wax and that which mouldeth it are not of one same kind. Hence, underneath the ideal stamp, they more or less reflect it. It hence results that, after its own kind, one selfsame plant bears better fruit and worse, and that with different natures ye are born. If tempered to perfection were the wax, and if the heavens were at their height of power, the whole light of the seal would be revealed. But nature, working as an artist doth, who hath, though skilled and toward his art disposed, a trembling hand, e'er gives it with a flaw. Hence, if the flaming love dispose and stamp the lucid vision of the primal power, complete perfection is therein acquired. Thus rendered worthy of an animal's complete perfection was the earth of old. Thus also was the Virgin rendered pregnant. Hence thine opinion I as true commend, that human nature never was, nor will be, such as it once in those 2 persons was. And now, if I no further went, how then could he be peerless? Would thy words begin. But that what seems not so may now seem clear, think who he was, and what the cause which moved him in his request, when ask was said to him. I have not spoken so, that thou shouldst not see clearly that a king he was, who asked wisdom to be a worthy king, and not to know the number of the angels here, nor whether from a necessary premise with one contingent a necessity e'er followed as result, nor yet to know if a first motion needs must granted be, nor whether a triangle could be made with no right angle in a semicircle. Hence, if thou note both what I said and this, a royal wisdom is that peerless vision, on which the shaft of my intention strikes. And if too hath arisen, thou direct clear eyes, thou'lt see that it refers to kings alone, who many are, and few the good. With this distinction take thou what I said, for it can stand with that which thou believ'st of man's first father, and of our delight. And let this air be led unto thy feet, to make thee, like one weary, slowly move to both the yea and nay thou seest not. For very low among the fools is he, who affirms without distinction, or denies, in one as in the other case, because it happens that quickly formed opinion is often in a wrong direction turned, and then the feelings bind the intellect, for worse than vainly leaveth he the shore, who fishes for the truth and hath no skill, since, such as he set out, he comes not back. And in the world are patent proofs of this, Parmenides, Melissus, Bryson, ay, and many who advanced, but knew not whither. So did Sabellius, Arius, and those fools who to the Scriptures were as sword blades are, in making faces crooked which were straight. In judging, let not people be too sure, like him who in the field computes the ears, or ever they are ripe. For I have seen a thorn bush seem all winter stiff and wild, and later bear a rose upon its top. And once I saw a vessel running straight and swiftly o'er the sea through all her course, and end by sinking at the harbour's mouth. Let not Dame Bertha or Sir Martin think, on seeing one man rob and one give alms, that they behold them as they seem to God, for that one may get up.
Section 81 of the Divine Comedy by Dante Alighieri, translated by Courtney Langdon. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Paradiso, Canto 14. The Fourth Heaven. The Sun. The Fifth Heaven. Mars. The Happiness of Heroism.
In rounded vessels water moves from rim to centre, and from centre so to rim, according as one strikes it from without or from within. What I am saying here fell suddenly into my mind when once the glorious life of Thomas ceased to speak, because of the resemblance which arose between his speech and that of Beatrice, who after him was pleased to speak as follows.
This spirit needs, although he tells you so, neither by voice nor e'en by thinking it, to reach the root of still another truth. Tell him, then, if the light wherewith your substance is flowering will remain with you the same eternally as even now it is. And if it still remains so, tell him how, when ye have been made visible again, it can be such as not to hurt your sight.
As, when impelled and drawn by greater gladness, those who are dancing lift at times their voices, and give their actions greater sprightliness. So at that prompt and reverent request, the holy circles showed new joyousness, both in their whirl and in their wondrous song. He that lamenteth that we die down here to live up yonder, hath not seen up there the comfort of the eternal reign. that 1 and 2 and 3, whoever lives and reigns in 3 and 2 and 1, uncircumscribed, and circumscribing everything, was there by each and all of yonder spirits sung with such a melody that it would be a just reward for any one's desert. And in the smallest ring's divinest light I heard a gentle voice, like that with which perhaps the angel spoke to Mary, answer,
As long as Paradise's joy shall last, so long our love will radiate around it a garment such as this. Its clarity is patterned on our ardour, and our ardour upon our vision, and as keen is that as is the grace it hath above its worth. When with our glorious and perfected flesh we are clothed again, our persons will give greater pleasure, because of being all complete. Wherefore, whatever freely given light the good Supreme may grant us will increase, a light permitting us to see Him, whence our vision needs must grow, and grow the ardour which from it is enkindled, and hence grow the radiance likewise which proceeds from this. But as a burning coal emits a flame, and by its vivid glow surpasses it, so that its own appearance is maintained, so will this brightness which surrounds us now be vanquished in appearance by the flesh, which still is covered by the earth, nor will so great a light avail to weary us, because our body's organs will be strong for whatsoe'er is able to delight us.
So quick and careful seemed both choirs to say Amen, that clearly a desire they showed to have their buried bodies, and not perhaps for their own sakes alone, but for their mothers and fathers and the others, who were dear to them ere they became eternal flames. Then round us everywhere, of equal brightness, outside the lustre there, another rose, like an horizon which is growing clear, and as new apparitions come in sight throughout the sky, at early evening's rise, so that one's vision seems, and seems not, true. Meseemed that new subsistences I there began to see, and that a ring was forming outside the other two circumferences. O thou true sparkling of the Holy Spirit, how suddenly and glowingly it flashed before mine eyes, which vanquished stood it not. But Beatrice revealed herself so fair and smiling, that this vision must be left among those that followed not my memory. I hence gained strength to raise mine eyes again, and with my lady alone I saw myself borne to a higher grade of blessedness. I well perceived that I was higher up, by reason of the stars' enkindled smile, which ruddier seemed to me than is its wont. With all my heart, and with that kind of speech which is the same in all, I made to God such holocaust as was befitting this new grace. And the ardour of my offered self had not yet been exhausted from my breast, when I perceived that sacrifice was welcome and pleasing. For to me there then appeared splendours between two rays, so bright and red that I exclaimed, O Helios, who dost so adorn them! As the galaxy, bedecked with smaller and with greater lights, so glimmers 'tween the world's poles, that even the wise are led to doubt. Thus, constellated in the depths of Mars, those rays described the honoured sign, which in a circle quadrant joinings make. My memory overcomes my genius here, because that cross so lightened forth the Christ, that I can find therefore no fit example. But whosoever taketh up his cross and follows Christ will pardon me again for what I leave, when in that glow he sees the Christ flash forth. Lights moved about from arm to arm, and 'tween the summit and the base, and sparkled brightly when they met, and when they passed each other. Thus we here see, straight and crooked, swift and slow, and ever renewing their appearance, particles of bodies long and short, as through a ray they move, whereby at times that shade is streaked, which folk, to shield them, make with skill and art. And as a viol or a harp, attuned with many strings, a pleasant tinkling makes for one by whom the music is not caught, so from the lights which there appeared to me, a melody was gathered through the cross, which rapt me, though I made not out the hymn. I well perceived it was of lofty praise, because "Arise and conquer" came to me, as to who heard, but did not understand. So much in love with it did I become, that naught had ever fettered me before with such sweet bonds. My words perhaps appear too bold, in that they lower set the pleasure given me by the lovely eyes, looking in which my longing finds its rest. But who considers that the living seals of all fair things do more, the higher up, and that I had not there looked up at them, may pardon me for what, to be excused, I'm self-accused, and see that I speak true.
Section 82 of the Divine Comedy by Dante Alighieri, translated by Courtney Langdon. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Paradiso, Canto 15. The Fifth Heaven. Mars, the happiness of heroism. Martyrs of religion and altruism. Cacciaguida.
The kindly will, wherein is always shown the love which is by righteousness inspired, as greed is in the evil will revealed, silence imposed on that sweet singing lyre, and caused those holy chords to be at rest, which heaven's right hand slackens, and draweth tight. How shall those substances to righteous prayers be deaf, who ceased from song with one accord, to give me the desire to pray to them? 'Tis well that he should boundlessly lament, who for the sake of that which lasteth not, deprives himself for ever of that love. As through serene and quiet evening skies there darts from time to time a sudden fire, which startles tranquil eyes that were at rest, and seems to be a star which changes place, saving that naught is missing where it flashed, and that itself lasts but a little while. So, from the arm which to the right extends, down to that cross's foot, there ran a star drawn from the constellation shining there. Nor from its ribbon did the gem depart, but through the radial band ran on, and looked like fire when back of alabaster moving. With the like affection did Anchises' shade reach forth, if our best muse deserve belief, when in Elysium he perceived his son.
O thou, my blood, O overflowing grace of God, to whom, as unto thee, was e'er the gate of heaven unlocked a second time?
Thus spoke that light, hence I thereto gave heed. Then to my lady turning back my face, I was on this side and on that amazed, for such a smile was glowing in her eyes, that I with mine thought I had touched the depths both of my grace and of my paradise. Thereat, a pleasure both to hear and see, the spirit joined to his beginning things I did not fathom, so profound his speech. Nor did he hide himself from me by choice, but by necessity, for his conception set itself higher than a mortal's aim. And when the bow of his impassioned love had so relaxed its tension that his words descended to the level of our mind, the first thing that was understood by me was,
Blessed be thou that, trine and one, hast been so courteous to my seed.
And he went on,
A pleasing and a long protracted fast, derived from reading in the mighty volume, wherein nor white nor dark is ever changed, hast thou relieved my son within this light in which I now address thee, thanks to her, who for the lofty flight hath feathered thee. Thou deemest that to me thy thoughts flow down from him who primal is, as from a one, if known it be, proceeds a 5 and 6. Yet who I am thou dost not ask of me, nor wherefore I appear to thee more glad than any other in this joyous throng. Thou deemest what is true, because the small and great of this life at that mirror gaze, wherein, before thou think, thou show'st thy thought. But that the holy love, wherewith I watch with sight perpetual, and which causes me to thirst with sweet desire, may be fulfilled the better, let thy voice, firm, bold, and glad, proclaim the will, proclaim the wish, whereto my answer has already been decreed.
To Beatrice I turned, and she had heard before I spoke, and smiled a nod to me, which caused the wings of my desire to grow. Then I thus: when the first equality revealed himself to you, wisdom and love became for each of you of equal weight. Because the sun, whose heat and light illumined and warmed you, is of such equality, that all comparisons therewith are poor. But in the case of mortals, will and speech, because of reasons manifest to you, are differently feathered in their wings. Hence I, who mortal am, now realize this inequality, and render thanks with heart alone to thy paternal greeting. I earnestly beseech thee, living topaz, set in this precious jewel like a gem, that with thy name thou make me satisfied.
O thou, my leaf, in whom I pleasure took, while still awaiting thee, thy root I was.
He thus, as he replied to me, began, and then he said to me,
The one from whom thy family is named, and who hath circled the mountain for 100 years and more around the first ledge, was my son, and thy great-grandsire. Well behoveth it that thou shouldst shorten by thy works his long fatigue. Florence, within the ancient ring of walls, from which she still receives her tierce and nones, sober and modest still, abode in peace. No bracelets had she then, nor coronets, nor dames with ornamented shoes, or belts more likely to be looked at than themselves. Nor did a daughter frighten yet at birth her father, for her marriage age and dowry outran in neither way due measure yet. No houses had she void of families, nor yet had a Sardanapalus come to show us what could be achieved in halls. Not yet had Monte Malo been surpassed by your Ucellatoio, which, outdone in its ascent, will be so in its fall. Belincion Berti going girt I saw with bone and leather, and his lady leave her looking-glass without a painted face. And Nerli's lord I saw, and the Delvecchios with unlined skins contented, and their dames with spindle and with thread. O lucky women! Sure of her burial place was each, and none as yet deserted in her bed for France. One stayed awake, absorbed in cradle cares, and used in comforting, the speech which forms a father's and a mother's first delight. Another from her distaff drawing flax, repeated for her household olden tales about the Trojans, Fiesole, and Rome. As great a marvel then would a Ciangella or Lapo Salterello have been held, as Cincinnatus or Cornelia now. To such a calm and beautiful town life, to such a safe community, to such a pleasant inn did Mary, called aloud, give me, and at the same time I became, within your ancient baptistry, a Christian and Cacciaguida. Moronto was my brother, and Eliseo. From the Po's valley came my lady to me, and from her name thine was formed. The Emperor Conrad afterward I followed, and among his chivalry he belted me a knight. By my good deeds I so obtained his favour. In his train I went against that law's iniquity, whose people, through your shepherd's fault, usurps your jurisdiction. There, by that vile folk, was I relieved from that deceitful world, the love of which debased.
Section 83 of the Divine Comedy by Dante Alighieri, translated by Courtney Langdon. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Paradiso, Canto 16. The Fifth Heaven. Mars. The Happiness of Heroism. The Old and New Population of Florence.
O thou, our small nobility of blood, that thou shouldst make some people boast of thee down here, where languid our affections are, will never be to me a wondrous thing. For there, where love turns not aside, in heaven I mean, even I myself was proud of thee. Thou truly art a cloak which soon grows short, so that from day to day, if thou be not patched out, time goes around thee with its shears. Hence with the yew which Rome the first endured, and in whose use her race least perseveres, my words began again. Whence Beatrice, who at a little distance from me stood, by smiling here, resembled her who coughed at the first fault ascribed to Guinevere. You are my father, I began to say. You to my speech complete assurance give. You so uplift me that I'm more than I. My mind is by so many brooklets filled with joy, that it congratulates itself that without breaking it can stand the strain. Tell me then, you my dear progenitor, who were your ancestors, and what the years which in your boyhood's time were chronicled? And tell me of the sheepfold of St. John, how large it was, and who were in it then, that in the highest seats deserved to sit. As at the breathing of the winds a coal is quickened into flame, even so I saw at my endearing words that bright light glow. And to mine eyes, as fairer it became, so with a gentler and a sweeter voice, but not in this our modern form of speech, it said to me,
From that day on, when Hail was uttered, to the childbirth when my mother, who now is sainted, was relieved of me who burdened her, this fire had to its lion 450 times returned, to light itself again beneath its paws. My first progenitors and I were born just there, where first the town's last ward is found, by him who runneth in your annual race. Let of my forebears this suffice to hear. For as to who they were, and whence came hither, silence is more commendable than speech. All those that tween Mars' statue and the Baptist, who at that time were able to bear arms, were but the fifth of those that live there now, but then its citizens, who now with men from Campi, Certaldo, and Figine mix, were in the lowest artisan seen pure. Oh, how much better it would be to keep as neighbours those to whom I here refer, and at Galuzzo and Trespiano mark our boundary, than have them in our town, and bear the stench of Agurione's churl, and Signa's, who for graft hath sharpened eyes. If those who in the world are lowest fallen had not stepmother like to Caesar been, but kind as to her son a mother is, one such is now a Florentine, and barters and trades, who would have turned to Semifonti, where formerly his grandsire mounted guard. The Conti still would own their Montemurlo, the Cerchi and Accone's parish be, and in the Val di Greve still, perhaps, the Buondelmonti. Ever was the mixing of clans the fountain of the city's woe, as of the body's ill superfluous food, for sooner will a blinded bull succumb than will a blinded lamb, and one sword oft will cut both more and better than will five. If thou consider Luni and Urbisaria, how they have gone, and how now in their wake Chiusi and Sinigalia go their way, it will not seem or strange for thee or hard to hear how families degenerate, since even cities have their term of life. All your creations die as well as you, but death conceals itself in some that long endure, while individual lives are short. And as the turning of the lunar sphere covers and bears earth's shores without surcease, e'en so doth fortune deal with Florence. Hence it should not seem a wondrous thing to thee what I of those great Florentines shall say, whose fame is hidden in the folds of time. I saw the Ugi, and saw the Catellini, Filippi, Greci, Ormani, and Alberici, though in decline, illustrious citizens, and I, as great as they were ancient, saw, with him of La Sanella, him of Larca, the Soldanieri, Ardinghi, and Bostichi, over the gate, which is at present burdened with recent felony of such great weight that there will soon be jetsam from the bark, the Ravignani dwelt, from whom there sprung Count Guido, and whoever since his time hath noble Bevincione's name assumed. He of La Presa knew already how to rule, and Gallicaio in his house already had a gilded hilt and pommel. Mighty already were the column of the Ver, Sacchetti, Luocchi, Fifanti, and Barucci, the Galli, and those that for the bushel blush. The stock whence the Calfucci sprang was great already, while already were the Sizzi and Rigucci raised to curule chairs. And oh, how great I saw those now undone through arrogance! Then, too, the golden balls decked Florence forth in all her mighty deeds. So likewise fared the ancestors of those who, when your church is vacant, always fatten by staying in consistory together. The haughty race, which like a dragon deals with those that flee, and unto those that show their teeth or purse is peaceful as a lamb, was rising now, but from so low a clan that Ubertine Donati was displeased, when by his own wife's father made their kin. Already had the Caponzacco dropped from Fiesole into the market, while as townsmen good were Guida and Infangato. I'll tell a thing incredible and true. The small ring then was entered by a gate, which from the Della Pera took its name. Each one who bears that mighty baron's arms, whose name and whose renown the festival of Thomas keepeth green, received from him knighthood and privilege, though he to-day consorteth with the people, who surrounds them with a border. Both the Gualterotti and Importuni were already there, and now their Borgo would more quiet be, if from new neighbours it were fasting still. The family which to your tears gave birth, through the just scorn which brought about your death and put an end to your once happy life, was honoured in itself and in its kin. How, Buondelmonte, ill-advised thou wast to flee their marriage, counselled by another! Many would happy be who now are sad, if God had to the Ama granted thee, when coming for the first time into town. But Florence, to that mutilated stone which guards the bridge, must needs a sacrifice afford, when in her final hour of peace. With these same families, and others with them, Florence I saw in such a state of rest, that no occasion had she then for tears. With these same families I saw her then, so glorious and so righteous, that the lily was never set.
Section 84 of the Divine Comedy by Dante Alighieri, translated by Courtney Langdon. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Paradiso, Canto 17. The Fifth Heaven. Mars. The Happiness of Heroism. Foreknowledge and Freedom. Dante's Exile and First Refuge.
As that one came to Clymene, who still to sons makes fathers chary, to be sure of that which he had heard against himself. Even such was I, and such was felt to be by Beatrice, and by the holy lamp, who first on my account had changed his place. Wherefore my lady said to me,
Express thy wish's ardour, so that it may issue clearly impressed by its internal stamp, not that our knowledge may the greater grow by words of thine, but that thou mayst get used to tell thy thirst, that we may pour thee drink.
O my dear root, that so dost lift thyself, that as terrestrial minds perceive that no triangle holds two angles which are both obtuse, thou likewise, gazing at the point to which all things are present, dost perceive contingent things, ere in themselves they are. While I by Virgil was accompanied, upward around the mount which healeth souls, and downward through the region of the dead, grave words were told me of my future life. Although indeed I feel myself foursquare against the blows of fortune, my desire would hence contented be, were I to hear what kind of fortune is approaching me, for slower comes an arrow when foreseen. Thus to that light I spoke which had before addressed me, and as Beatrice had willed, so was my wish confessed. Not in vague terms, in which the foolish folk of old were wont to get entangled, ere the Lamb of God, who taketh sins away, was put to death, but with clear words and unambiguous speech, that Father's love replied, which by its smile was both concealed and rendered manifest.
Contingence, which outside your matter's volume doth not extend, is in the eternal vision wholly depicted, yet it taketh not necessity therefrom, save as a ship, while down a current moving, doth from eyes which mirror it. Therefrom, as from an organ, sweet harmony attains one's ears, the time which is for thee preparing strikes my sight. As through his false and cruel stepmother Hippolytus left Athens, so must thou leave Florence. This is willed already, this is sought, and soon will be achieved by him who meditates it there, where every day Christ is both bought and sold. As usually the blame will be imputed to the wronged in public outcry, but revenge for it will witness to the truth dispensing it. Thou shalt abandon all that thou hast loved with greatest tenderness, and of its shafts this is the one which exile's bow shoots first. Thou shalt find out how salt another's bread is wont to taste, and what a painful thing is going up and down another's stairs. But what will bow thy shoulders most will be the bad and foolish company with whom thou'lt fall into this vale, for all ungrateful, mad, and malevolent will it become against thee, but soon thereafter it, not thou, will have its forehead red with blood. Its deeds will furnish proof of its bestiality. Hence well becoming will it be for thee to have made thyself a party by thyself. Thy earliest refuge and first lodging-place shall be the courtesy of that great Lombard, who on the ladder bears the holy bird, and who will have for thee such kind regard, that 'tween you two in doing and in asking, that will be first, which is with others last. With him the man thou'lt see, who was when born so stamped by this strong star, that notable will be his deeds. By reason of his youth, the nations are not yet aware of him, for only 9 years have these wheels revolved around him. But before the Gascon chief, the noble Henry, sparks of his character will manifest themselves by disregard for money or for toil, and so well known will his munificence hereafter be, that even his enemies will not be able to still their tongues at it. On him rely, and on his favours. Many will be changed because of him, the rich and those that beg exchanging states. And written on thy mind shalt thou bear hence, but shalt not tell it.
Here he told me things incredible to those who shall be present. Then he added,
Son, glosses are these on what was said to thee. Behold the snares which lie concealed behind not many circlings of the sun. And yet I would not have thee envious toward thy neighbours, because thy life far longer will extend than will the punishment of their bad faith.
When by his silence that blessed soul had showed that he was through with weaving in the woof of that same web which I had given him warped, then I began, like one who, doubting, longs for counsel from a man who both perceives, wills righteously, and loves. I clearly see, my father, how toward me a time spurs on, to deal me such a blow as heaviest is to him who gives least heed to it. 'Tis therefore well that I should so with foresight arm myself, that if the place which is to me most dear be taken from me, I lose not the rest by these my verses. Downward through the world whose bitterness is endless, and around the mount from whose fair top my lady's eyes have lifted me, and afterward through heaven from light to light, things have I heard which, if repeated, will for many have the taste of bitter herbs, and yet, if I'm to truth a timid friend, I fear lest life I lose with those who shall of this age speak as ancient. The light wherein that treasure smiled, which there I found, sparkled at first, as in a sunbeam a golden mirror would, and then replied,
A conscience gloomy either with its own or with another's shame will feel indeed the harshness of thy words, yet none the less, all falsehood having been removed from it, cause thy whole vision to be manifest, and where the itch is let the scratching be. For if, when tasted first, thy voice shall prove offensive, it will after leave behind it, when once digested, vital nourishment. This cry of thine will do as doth the wind, which strikes the loftiest summits most, and this will no slight honour prove. Hence only souls well known to fame were shown thee in these heavens, upon the mount, and in the woeful vale, because the mind of him who hears rests not, nor strengthens its belief by illustrations, based
Section 85 of the Divine Comedy by Dante Alighieri, translated by Courtney Langdon. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Paradiso, Canto 18, the fifth heaven, Mars, the spirits of heroes. The sixth heaven, Jupiter, the happiness of justice.
That blessed mirror was enjoying now its thoughts alone, and I was tasting mine, tempering their sweetness with their bitterness, when that same lady who was leading me to God said,
Change thy thought. Recall that near I am to who unburdens every wrong.
I turned me at my comfort's loving voice, and in her holy eyes what kind of love I then beheld, I here refrain from saying, not only since mine own words I distrust, but since my mind cannot return so far above itself, unless another guide it. This only of that moment can I tell, that my affection, while I gazed at her, was freed from longing for all other things, as long as joy eternal, which directly shone on Beatrice, with its reflected aspect, was from her lovely face contenting me. Conquering me with the splendour of a smile, she said,
Turn round and hark, for paradise is not exclusively within my eyes.
As our affection here is seen at times upon our countenance, if such it be that our whole spirit is thereby absorbed, so in the flaming of the blessed effulgence to whom I turned, I recognized his wish to have a little further talk with me.
In this fifth threshold of the tree,
it then began,
which from its summit draws its life, always bears fruit, and never loses leaves, are blessed spirits, who before they came to heaven enjoyed so great a fame below that every muse would be thereby enriched. Gaze therefore at the cross's arms, and he whom I shall name will there perform the act, which in a cloud its own swift fire performs.
I saw a splendour drawn along the cross at Joshua's name, the moment it was uttered. Nor did I note the name before the deed. And at great Maccabeus's name I saw another spirit whirling as he moved, and gladness was the whip that turned the top. Likewise at Charlemagne's and Roland's names my gaze intently followed two of them, as doth a falconer's eye his flying bird. Then William afterward, and Renoir, Duke Godfrey next, and Robert Guiscard drew my sight along that cross. And then, moving and mingling with the other lights, the soul which had addressed me showed how great an artist 'mong heaven's choristers he was. Round to my right I turned me to behold in Beatrice my duty, signified by speech or act, and I beheld her eyes, so joyous and so clear that what she seemed surpassed her other and her latest wont. And as because of feeling more delight in doing good, a man from day to day perceiveth that his virtue is increasing, even so, on seeing that that miracle was fairer now, I noticed that the arc of my revolving with the heavens had grown. And as within a little space of time a lady turneth white, whene'er her face rids itself of the burden of its shame, such to mine eyes the change when I had turned through the white colour of the temperate 6th star which had received me in itself. I saw within that jovial torch of light the sparkling of the love contained in it, shaping our language forth before mine eyes. And even as birds on rising from the shore, as if in gratulation at the food they've found, form groups, now round and now of other shapes, thus holy creatures in those lights were singing, as here and there they flew, and with their forms made of themselves now D, now I, now L. Each singing to its note, they moved at first. Then, on becoming one of these same letters, they stopped a little while, and silent kept. O thou divine Pegasian muse, that glorious dost make men's genius, and dost render it long-lived, as it through thee doth towns and realms, so shed thy light on me, that I may here describe their figures even as I perceived them. In these brief verses let thy power appear. They then displayed themselves in consonants and vowels 5 times 7, and as their parts seemed to be said to me, I noted them. Diligite justitiam were first verb and noun of all that was depicted there. Qui judicatis terram were the last. Then in the 5th word's M they so remained arranged that Jupiter seemed silver there, pricked out with gold. And other lights I saw descend upon the summit of the M, and rest there, singing, I believe, the good which draws them to itself. Then, as when logs are struck while burning, endless sparks fly up, whence fools are wont to draw their auguries, more than 1,000 lights appeared to rise, and upward move, some much, and some a little, even as the sun, which setteth them on fire, allotted them. And when they quiet were, each in its place, an eagle's head and neck I saw portrayed by that outstanding fire. He who paints there hath none to be his guide, but is his own guide, and from him derives the instinct which is formative in nests. The other blessed ones, who at first appeared content to form a lily on the M, went slowly on to shape the eagle's form. O gentle star, what and how many gems proved to me that our justice here results from that heaven's influence which is gemmed by thee. I therefore pray the mind wherein thy motion and virtue start, that it may so regard the source, whence comes the smoke which spoils thy rays, that it may now a second time be wroth with sale and purchase in that temple's court, whose walls were built with blood and martyrdom. O soldiers of the heaven I contemplate, pray ye for those that are on earth, all gone astray behind the bad example there. War was once carried on with swords, but now by taking here and there that bread away, the pitying Father keepeth locked from none. But thou that writest but to cancel, think that Peter and Paul, who for that vineyard died, which thou art laying waste, are still alive. Well mayst thou say, so set is my desire on him, whose will it was to live alone.
Section 86 of the Divine Comedy by Dante Alighieri, translated by Courtney Langdon. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Paradiso, Canto 19. The 6th Heaven. Jupiter. The happiness of justice. Inscrutability of God's justice. Unjust princes.
Before me now, with wings outspread, appeared the lovely image, which in sweet fruition these joyous interwoven spirits made. Each one of them a little ruby seemed, wherein a ray of sunlight burned so brightly that it was mirrored back into mine eyes. And what I now must needs relate, no voice hath e'er reported, nor hath ink inscribed, nor hath imagination ever grasped. For I both saw and heard the beak converse, and utter in its voice both I and my, when in its meaning it was we and our. And it began,
Because of being just and merciful, I'm to a glory raised up here, which doth not let itself be won by mere desire. And such a fame I left on earth, that evil people there commend it, but fail to follow its recorded works.
As out of many embers one sole heat makes itself felt, so from that image, formed by many loves, a single voice came forth. Hence I thereafter, O perpetual flowers of joy eternal, who let all your odours seem only one to me, by breathing break the painful fast, which long hath given me hunger, for I on earth have found no food for it. Well do I know that even if in heaven justice divine makes of another realm its looking-glass, yours apprehends it not through any veil. Ye know with what attention I gird myself to listen, and ye know the doubt which is so old a fast for me. And as a falcon from his hood set free tosses his head, and flapping his proud wings displays his eagerness, and plumes himself, such I beheld the symbol which is weaved by praises of the grace divine, become with songs, which who up there rejoices knows. It then began,
He who his compass turned around the world's vast verge, and in it parted its many hidden things from those revealed, was not so able to impress his virtue on all the world, that his conceived ideal should not remain in infinite excess. And this assures one that the first proud being who greater was than all created spirits, through not awaiting light, untimely fell. It hence results that every lesser nature is but a scant recipient for the good which hath no end, and measures self by self. Your vision, therefore, which must needs be one of that mind's rays, wherewith all things are filled, of its own nature cannot be so strong that it should not perceive its source as being far greater than is all that it can see. The vision, therefore, which your world receives into eternal justice penetrates as doth an eye into the sea, because, though it perceive its bottom near the shore, when on the deep it sees it not, yet there it is, but its great depth conceals it. That is not light which comes not from the sky which never clouds itself, but rather darkness, a shadow of the flesh, or else its poison. Sufficiently disclosed to thee is now the hiding place which once concealed from thee the living justice, which so frequently it is thy wont to question. For thou saidst, A man is born upon the Indus's banks, with no one there to speak of Christ, or read, or write, and all his actions and desires are good, as far as human reason sees, and without sin in either life or speech. Then, unbaptized and without faith, he dies. Wherein consists the justice which condemns him? Where is his fault, if he believeth not? Now who art thou, that as a judge wouldst sit to judge of things 1,000 miles away, with the short vision of a human span? Surely for him who subtly strives with me, were not the Scriptures ruling over you, wondrous occasions would there be for doubt. O earthly creatures! O uncultured minds! The primal will, which of itself is good, ne'er from itself, the highest goodness, moved. That much is just, which is therewith accordant. No good created draws it to itself, but it by radiating causes it.
As o'er her nest a stork moves circling round after the feeding of her little ones, and as the one that's fed looks up at her, such did the blessed shape become, which moved its pinions, by so many counsels urged, and likewise so did I lift up my brows. Wheeling around, it sang and said,
As now my notes to thee that understands them not, such to you mortals is eternal justice.
When those bright flamings of the Holy Spirit had come to rest, still in the shape which caused the Romans to be honoured by the world,
None to this kingdom,
it began again,
ever ascended without faith in Christ, neither before or after he was nailed upon the tree. But many, lo, shout Christ, who at the judgment shall be far less near him than will be such an one who knows not Christ. Christians like these the Ethiop will condemn, When parted, shall the two assemblies be, one rich eternally, the other poor? What will the Persians to your rulers say, when lying open they shall see the book, wherein all their dispraises are inscribed? There will be seen, among the deeds of Albert, that which ere long will move the pen, because thereby Prague's kingdom will become a waste. There will be seen the woe which on the Seine he who shall perish by a boar's skin blow bringeth about by falsifying coin. There will be seen the pride and thirsty greed which makes the Scot and Englishman so mad that neither can remain within his bounds. One will see there the easy life and lust of him of Spain and of Bohemia too, who neither of them knew nor cared for valor. One will see there, marked with a single eye, the virtues of Jerusalem's lame king, whereas an M will mark the contrary. One will see there the greed and cowardice of him who ruleth over the Isle of Fire, where once Anchises ended his long life. And, to explain his insignificance, his record will consist of shortened words, which in a little space will notice much. And there to each and all will be revealed the foul deeds of his uncle and his brother, who 2 crowns and a noble line disgraced. And he of Portugal and he of Norway will there be known, as also Rossia's prince, who in an ill hour saw Venetia's coin. O happy Hungary, if she no more shall let herself be wronged! Happy Navarre, if with her girding hills she arm herself. And both these should believe that Nicosia and Famagosta, as a proof of this,
Section 87 of the Divine Comedy by Dante Alighieri, translated by Courtney Langdon. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Paradiso, Canto 20, the sixth heaven, Jupiter, the happiness of justice, just princes, faith and salvation, predestination.
When he who sheddeth light on all the world so far below our hemisphere descends that daylight fades away on every side, the sky, once lighted up by him alone, is quickly rendered visible again by many lights, whereof one only shines. And I this happening in the sky recalled, when silent in the blessed beak became the standard of the world and of its leaders. For brighter far those living lights commenced songs which have fled and fallen from my mind. O thou sweet love, that with a smile dost cloak thee, how ardent in those flutes didst thou appear, whose only breath was that of holy thoughts! After those precious and pellucid jewels, wherewith I saw the sixth great light engemmed, had brought to silence their angelic chimes, I seemed to hear the murmur of a brook, which, flowing limpid down from rock to rock, reveals the abundance of its mountain springs. And as a sound takes from a citern's neck its form, even as the air that enters it doth from the vent-hole of a shepherd's pipe, so, all delay of waiting laid aside, that murmur of the eagle mounted up along its neck, as if it hollow were. A voice it there became, and through its beak it issued forth in words, such as the heart whereon I wrote them down was longing for.
That part of me which sees and braves the sun, immortal eagles,
it began again,
must now be looked upon attentively, for of the fires wherewith I shape me, those wherewith the eye is sparkling in my head, the highest are of all their ordered grades. He that as pupil in the middle shines was once the singer of the Holy Spirit, who bore the ark about from town to town. He now knows how deserving was his song, so far as it resulted from his will, by the reward proportioned to its merit. Of 5 that make a circle for my brow, the spirit nearest to my beak was he who comforted the widow for her son. He now knows by his personal experience of this sweet life and of its opposite, how dear it costs one not to follow Christ. in the circumference of which I speak, he that comes next upon the rising ark delayed his death by genuine repentance. He now knows that eternal justice brooks no change, whenever worthy prayers below to-morrows make of that which was to-day's. The one who follows, with the laws and me, with good intentions which produced bad fruits, made himself Greek by ceding to the shepherd. He now knows that the ill, from his good deed derived, is not a cause of harm to him, although thereby the world may be destroyed. He whom thou seest in the downward ark, the William was, for whom that country mourns, which weeps because its Charles and Frederick live. He now knows how heaven loves a righteous king, and by his splendor's glow reveals it still. Who in the erring world below would think that Ripheus the Trojan was the fifth among the holy lights which form this curve? He now knows many of the things the world is impotent to see in grace divine, although his sight discerneth not its depths.
Like a young lark, which as it soars through space, first sings, and then is silent, satisfied with the last sweetness which contented her. Such seemed to me the image of the seal of that eternal pleasure, by whose will each thing becometh what it is. And though, with reference to my doubt, up there I was, as glass is to the colour which it clothes, it could not bear to bide its time in silence, but by the very force of its own weight urged from my mouth the words, "What things are these?" Whereat I saw a glorious feast of sparkling. Thereafter with its eye the more enkindled, the blessed sign, in order not to keep me in wondering suspense, replied to me,
I see that thou believest all these things, because I say them, but dost not see how, and therefore, though believed in, they are hidden. Thou dost as one who fully knows a thing by name, but cannot see just what it is, unless another make it manifest. Regnum coelorum suffers violence from burning love, and from a living hope, which vanquishes the will divine, though not as man o'ercometh man, but conquers it because it willeth to be overcome, and so, though vanquished, by its goodness wins. The first life in the eyebrow, and the fifth, cause thee to be amazed, because therewith thou seest the region of the angels painted. They did not issue Gentiles from their bodies, as thou dost think, but Christians, with firm faith, one in the feet that were to suffer, one in those that had. For one, to claim his bones, came back from hell, where no one ever wills the good again. And this was the reward of living hope which put its trust in prayers addressed to God to raise him, that thus his will might have a chance to act. The glorious soul I speak of, when the flesh had been regained, wherein he stayed not long, believed in him who had the power to help him, and through belief so warmed to genuine love that he was worthy at his second death to come to this festivity. The other, through grace from so profound a spring distilled, that never hath the eye of any creature reached its first wave, set all his love below on righteousness. Hence God, from grace, to our redemption which is still to be, opened his eyes. He hence believed in it, and afterward endured no more the stench of paganism. And for it he rebuked those who perverted were. And those 3 ladies thou sawest at the right wheel of the car, in lieu of baptism, were as sponsors for him more than 1,000 years ere baptism was. O thou predestination, how remote are thy foundations from the sight of those who do not see the first cause as a whole! And ye, O mortals, keep yourselves in check, when judging men, for we, who God behold, know not as yet all those that are elect, and pleasant is such ignorance to us, because our good is in this good refined, that what is willed by God we also will.
Thus then, by that divinely pictured image, to make the shortness of my vision clear, a pleasant medicine was granted me. and as a skilful zither player makes the strings' vibrations follow a good singer, whereby the song acquires more power to please, even so, while it was speaking, I recall that both those blessed lights I then beheld, as when in
Section 88 of the Divine Comedy by Dante Alighieri, translated by Courtney Langdon. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Paradiso, Canto 21. The Seventh Heaven. Saturn. The Happiness of Contemplation. The Golden Ladder. Predestination. St. Peter Damian.
And now mine eyes upon my lady's face were fixed again, and therewithal my mind, which from all other objects had withdrawn. Nor was she smiling then, but,
Should I smile?
she said, addressing me.
Like Semele wouldst thou become when she to ashes turned, because my beauty, which along the stairs of this eternal palace brighter burns, as thou hast seen the higher we ascend, is so resplendent that thy mortal strength at its effulgence, were it not restrained, would be as is a bough which lightning rends. Up to the seventh splendor we are raised, which now beneath the burning lion's breast is raying downward mingled with his strength. Intently fix thy mind behind thine eyes, and cause them to be mirrors of the figure which in this mirror will appear to thee.
He that should know what, in the blessed face, the nature of my vision's pasture was, when I transferred me to another care, would know, since one was outweighed by the other, how gladly I obeyed my heavenly guide. Within the crystal which, as round the world it whirls, bears its illustrious leader's name, under whose rule all wickedness lay dead, coloured like gold whereon a sunbeam shone, a ladder I beheld, which so high up ascended that my eye pursued it not. I saw moreover coming down its steps so many glowing splendours that I thought that every star seen shining in the sky had been poured out of it. And even as doors, as is their natural wont when day begins, together move to warm their chilly plumes, and then without returning some fly off, and some go back to whence they started first, while others, whirling in a circle, stay. Such was, it seemed to me, the fashion here within the sparkling throng which came together, whene'er they met upon a certain round. And that which nearest to me there remained, became so bright that in my thoughts I said, I clearly see the love thou showest me. But she, whence I await the how and when of silence and of speech, keeps still. Hence I, against my will, do well by asking naught. She thereupon, who in the sight of him who seeth everything, my silence saw, said unto me,
Appease thy warm desire.
And I began, My merit doth not make me worthy of thy reply, but for the sake of her who granteth me the right to ask, make known to me, blessed life that art concealed in thine own joy, the cause which draweth thee so closely to my side, and tell me why that gentle symphony of paradise is silent in this wheel, which down below sounds so devoutly through the other spheres.
Thy hearing is as mortal as thy sight.
It answered me,
There is no singing here, because of that which hinders Beatrice from smiling. Down the holy ladder's steps have I so far descended, but to give thee a welcome with my words, and with the light which mantles me. Nor hath a greater love caused me to be more ready. For as much or more love burns up yonder, as those flames reveal to thee, but that great charity which makes us ready servants of the counsel which rules the world allots here, as thou seest.
I well perceive, O holy lamp, said I, how that free love is in this court enough for following the eternal providence. But this is what seems hard for me to see, why thou alone among thy consorts here predestinated wert for just this task. No sooner had I come to my last word, than like a rapid millstone whirling round, the light had of its middle made its centre, and then the love within it answered me.
Piercing the light wherein I'm here embosomed, a ray of light divine upon me falls, whose virtue, as it mingles with my sight, so lifts me o'er myself, that I behold that highest essence whence it emanates. Hence comes the joy with which I'm flaming now, for with thy sight, as far as it is clear, I equalize the clearness of my flame. And yet the most enlightened soul in heaven, the seraph who hath eyes most fixed on God, would not avail to satisfy thy question. For what thou askest plumbeth so the depths of God's eternal statute, from all that created vision is cut away. And to the mortal world on thy return carry this charge, that it presume no more to move its feet toward such a distant goal. The mind which shineth here on earth is smoky. Consider, hence, how it can do down there what, though assumed to heaven, it cannot do.
So all-conclusive were his words to me, that giving up the question I confined me to asking humbly of him who he was.
'Tween Italy's two seashores, cliffs arise not very far from thine own native place, so high that thunders peal much lower down, and form a lofty ridge called Cattleya, 'neath which our hermitage is consecrate, whose wont to worship only gives it up.
He thus began for me his third address, and then, continuing, said,
To serving God I there became so steadfastly devoted, that, feeding upon olive juice alone, I readily endured both heat and cold, and was with thoughts contemplative content. That cloister's wont it was to yield these heaven's abundant fruit, but it hath now become so empty, that its state must soon be known. In that place I was known as Peter Damian, and sinning Peter, in Our Lady's house I was, upon the Adriatic shore. But little mortal life remained to me, when I was sought, and forced to take the hat, which always passes on from bad to worse. Lean and barefooted Cephas came, and then the Holy Spirit's mighty vessel came, eating the food of any hostelry. Our modern shepherds now on either side need help to prop them, help, they weigh so much, to guide, and help to hold them up behind. They cover so their palfreys with their cloaks, that two beasts walk beneath a single hide. O patience, that dost tolerate so much.
More flamelets at these words I saw descend from step to step, and whirl, and every whirl caused each of them to grow more beautiful. And round this flame they came, and having stopped, uttered so deep a cry, that none could here resemble it.
Section 89 of the Divine Comedy by Dante Alighieri, translated by Courtney Langdon. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Paradiso, Canto 22. The Seventh Heaven. Saturn. Saint Benedict. The Eighth or Starry Heaven. The Twins.
Oppressed with stupor, to my guide I turned, as would a little child who always runs for help to where he most confides. And she, as doth a mother who at once assists her pale and breathless offspring with her voice, whose wont is to assure him, said to me,
Knowest thou not that thou art now in heaven? And knowest thou not that all of heaven is holy, and that of good zeal cometh all done here? To what extent the song, as well as I, by smiling would have changed thee, thou canst now imagine, since the cry has shocked thee so. In it, if thou hadst understood its prayers, already were the vengeance known to thee, which thou shalt see before thou die. Our sword up here cuts nor in haste nor tardily, save as to one it seems who waits for it with either apprehension or desire. But turn thyself around towards others now, for many illustrious spirits shalt thou see, if, as I tell thee, thou direct thine eyes.
Mine eyes I then directed as she pleased, and saw 100 little spheres, which, gathering, by mutual rays each other fairer made. Like one I was who checks within himself the goad of his desire, and dares not ask. so great his fear lest he may ask too much. The largest and most lustrous of those pearls came forward thereupon, to sate my wish concerning it. Within it then I heard,
If thou, as I do, couldst behold a love which burns among us here, thy thoughts would be expressed, but lest, by waiting, thou delayed thy lofty aim, I'll answer now the thought which causes thee to so restrain thyself. That mountain on whose slope Casino stands was once frequented on its top by folk, who both deluded were and ill disposed. And he am I, who first up yonder bore the name of him, who carried down to earth the truth which were exalted us so much, and such abundant grace upon me shone, that I withdrew the neighbouring villages from that vain worship which seduced the world. These other fires were all contemplatives, men who were kindled by the heat which brings the flowers and fruits of holiness to birth. Here is Macarius, Romuald is here, and here are those my brethren who remained in cloisters and who steadfast kept their hearts.
And I to him, The affection shown by thee in talking with me, and the kindliness I see and note in all your burning flames, have opened wide my trust, even as the sun dilates the rose, whene'er its petals ope as widely as they can. Because of this, I pray thee, Father, do thou then inform me if I am worthy to receive such grace as to behold thee with thy face unveiled. Then,
Brother,
he replied,
thy great desire in the last sphere above shall be fulfilled, where all thine others are, and mine as well. Every desire is perfect there, mature and whole. In that sphere only is each part where it has always been, for it is not in space, nor turns on poles, and up to it our ladder reaches, and because of this it steals itself away beyond thy ken. Jacob, the patriarch, beheld it stretch thus far its upper portion, when of old laden with angels it appeared to him. But from the earth, to climb it, no one now removes his feet, and my monastic rule remains but as a means of wasting paper. Walls which of old an abbey used to be, have now become the dens of thieves, and cowls are sacks now, filled with naught but wretched meal. But heavy Ashoru doth not rebel against God's will, as much as doth the fruit which renders so insane the hearts of monks. For, whatsoever the Church may hold in trust, is all for those that ask it in God's name, and not for relatives, or what is worse. So soft the flesh of mortals is, that good beginnings do not last as long below, as from an oak's until its acorn's birth. Peter began with neither gold nor silver, and I, with prayers and fasts, began my convent, as Francis, with humility, did his. And if thou look at each of these beginnings, and then consider whither each hath run, thou'lt see that what was white hath turned brown, Jordan turned backward, and the water fleeing when God was so willed, were much more wonderful to see, in fact, than succour would be here.
He thus addressed me. To his company thereat returning, they together closed. Then like a whirlwind all were upward rapt. The gentle lady up that ladder's rounds urged me behind them by a sign alone. Her virtue so o'ercame my natural weight. Nor here below, where one goes up and down by natural law, was motion e'er so swift as to be equal to my pinion's flight. So may I, reader, once again return to that celestial triumph, for whose sake I oft bewail my sins and smite my breast. Thou hadst not drawn away and put thy finger as quickly into fire, as I beheld the sign which follows Taurus, and was in it. O glorious stars, O light, that pregnant art with mighty virtue, from which I acknowledge all of my genius, whatsoe'er it be. With you was born, and in your midst was hiding he who is father of all mortal life, when first I breathed the Tuscan air, and then, when grace had been bestowed upon me here to enter that high wheel which turns you round, your region was the one allotted me. To you my sighing soul devoutly prays, that it may now acquire the power it needs for that hard task, which draws her to itself.
To ultimate salvation thou art now so near.
In answer Beatrice began.
That clear should be thine eyes, and keen their sight. Therefore, ere further thou in it thyself, look downward, and behold how great a world I have already set beneath thy feet, so that thy heart, as joyous as it can, may show itself to that triumphant throng which happy comes through this ethereal sphere.
Then with my vision I returned through one and all 7 spheres, and this globe I beheld such that its mean appearance made me smile. Hence that opinion I approve as best which deems it least, and thus may he be called who sets his thought on something else. Latona's daughter I enkindled saw, without the shadow which was once the cause of my believing her both rare and dense. The countenance, Hyperion, of thy son I here sustained, and saw how near to him both Maia and Dione round him move. And after this the temperance of Jove appeared to me, between his son and sire, and clear the reason for their change of place. All 7 of them were thus revealed to me, how great they are, how swift and far apart in their abodes. The little threshing floor which maketh us so fierce was as a whole revealed to me, from hills to river mouths, while I was circling.
Section 90 of the Divine Comedy by Dante Alighieri, translated by Courtney Langdon. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Paradiso, Canto 23. The 8th Heaven, the Fixed Stars, the Twins, Triumphant Spirits, the Son of God, the Mother of Christ.
Even as a bird, among the leaves she loves, settles upon the nest of her sweet brood throughout the night, which hides things from our eyes, and then, that she may see their longed-for looks, and find the food wherewith to nourish them, in doing which she deems hard work a pleasure, comes forth betimes upon an outer branch, and gazing steadfastly with burning love, waits for the sun till break of dawn. So stood my lady, toward that region turned intent, neath which the sun appears to show least haste. Hence I, on seeing her absorbed in thought, became like one who, yearning with desire for other things, contents himself with hope. But little time elapsed between each when, I mean from when I waited, till the sky I saw grow more and more suffused with light. Then Beatrice exclaimed,
Behold the hosts of Christ's victorious triumph, and all the fruit ingathered by the circling of these spheres.
To me her countenance seemed all on fire, and so replete with happiness her eyes, that I must pass without describing them. As when in cloudless skies the moon is full, Trivia among those nymphs eternal smiles, who deck with light the whole expanse of heaven. So I, above 1,000,000 lamps, beheld a sun which kindled one and all, as our sun kindles all the stars on high. And through the living light the shining substance was so transparent, and so brightly shone upon my face, that I endured it not. O Beatrice, thou dear and gentle guide!
That which o'erwhelms thee is a power,
she said,
against which nothing can defend itself. This is the wisdom, this the virtue is, which opened wide the road 'tween heaven and earth, which was in olden times so long desired.
As fire is liberated from a cloud, when so dilating that it finds no room, and falls against its nature to the earth, even so my mind, as it became enlarged among those viands, issued from itself. But what it then became cannot recall.
Open thine eyes, and see what now I am. Such things thou hast perceived, that now thou art equipped with power to look upon my smile.
I was like one who, when aroused from sleep, is of a dream aware which he forgets, and tries in vain to bring it back to mind. When I had heard a bidding which deserves such gratitude that never from the book which holds past records will it be effaced. If now to help me all those tongues should speak which Polyhymnia and her sisters fed most richly with the sweetest of their milk, The 1000th portion of the truth would not be reached, even though they sang the holy smile, and how it lighted up the holy face. Hence, painting Paradise, the sacred poem must leap like one who finds his path cut off. But none who to its weighty theme gave thought, and to the mortal shoulder bearing it, would blame it, should it tremble 'neath its load. No waters for a little boat are these. My daring plough goes cleaving on its way, nor for a pilot who would spare himself.
Why doth my countenance enamour thee so much, that to the garden beautiful thou turnest not, which blooms beneath Christ's rays? Here is the rose, in which the Word divine became incarnate. Here the lilies are, whose scent led men to take the righteous path.
Thus Beatrice. And I, who for her counsels was wholly ready, gave myself again to fight the battle of the feeble brows. As once my overshadowed eyes beheld a field of flowers in a ray of sunlight, which through a riven cloud was shining clear. Thus many a throng of splendours now I saw, illumined from on high by burning rays, but not the source of their effulgent light. O kindly virtue, who dost thus impress them, thou didst uplift thyself to give mine eyes, which were not strong yet, greater room to see. The name of that fair flower which I invoke each morn, and evening too, forced all my mind to turn its gaze upon the greatest fire. But when in both mine eyes the magnitude and splendour of that living star was painted, which vanquishes up there, as once down here, a torch, formed ringwise like a crown, descended from midmost heaven, and girdling her about, around her whirled. Whatever melody sounds sweetest here on earth, and to itself most strongly draws the soul, would seem a peal of thunder breaking from a cloud, if measured by the music of the lyre, with which that lovely sapphire crowned itself, whereby ensaphired glows the brightest heaven.
Angelic love am I, and circle round the exalted gladness breathing from the womb, which was the hostelry of our desire, and I shall whirl around it, Lady of Heaven, until thy Son thou follow, and diviner render the loftiest sphere by entering it.
The circling melody thus closed itself as with a seal, and all the other lights made Mary's name resound. The royal robe, of all the convolutions of the world, which burneth most, and by the breath and ways of God is quickened with the greatest life, had its internal shore so far above us, that, where I was, its semblance was not yet revealed to me. Mine eyes hence could not follow the flame which, crowned, behind its offspring rose. And as a child who, having had its milk, stretches its little arms up toward its mother, urged by the love which outwardly flames forth, thus each of those white spirits with its flame stretched up in such a way that its deep love for Mary was made manifest to me. Thereafter they remained there in my presence, singing, O Queen of Heaven, so tenderly that its delight hath never left me since. Oh, how abundant is the store heaped up in those most wealthy coffers, which were once good husbandmen for sowing seed below. Here, living on it, they enjoy the treasure, which, weeping in their exile, they acquired in Babylon, where gold was left untouched. Here triumphs, subject to the exalted Son of God and Mary, in his victory.
Section 91 of the Divine Comedy by Dante Alighieri, translated by Courtney Langdon. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Paradiso, Canto 24. The Eighth or Starry Heaven. The Twins. St. Peter examines Dante on faith. O fellowship elected to the banquet of that blessed Lamb, who feedeth you so well that ever sated is your appetite, since, by the grace of God, this man enjoys a foretaste of what falleth from your table, or ever death have set his time for him. Heed his immense desire, and on him shed a little of your dew. Ye from the source forever drink, whence cometh what he thinks.
Thus Beatrice. Thereat those happy spirits arranged themselves in spheres on steady poles, emitting brilliant flames as comets do. And even as wheels within the works of clocks so turn, for one who heeds them, that the first seems quiet, while the last appears to fly, even so, since at a different speed they whirled, those carol dancers, whether swift or slow, permitted me to estimate their wealth. From that one which I deemed of greatest beauty, I saw a fire so happy issue forth, that none of it left of greater brightness there. Then around Beatrice it turned 3 times with so divine a song, that even my fancy repeats it not for me. And so my pen takes a leap forward, and I write it not. For our imagination much more speech, too bright a colour is to paint such folds.
O holy sister mine, who so devoutly dost pray to us, thou, by thine ardent love, withdrawest me from yonder lovely sphere.
When once at rest again, that blessed fire turned toward my lady with his voice, which spoke as I have said, and she replied to him,
O thou eternal life of that great man, to whom of this great joy our Lord bequeathed the keys which he brought down, test thou this man as pleases thee, on questions light and grave pertaining to the faith, which formerly enabled thee to walk upon the sea. If well he love, well hope, and well believe, is not concealed from thee, because thy sight is thither turned, where all is seen depicted. But since this realm hath through the true faith won its citizens, 'tis well that, to its glory, it should befall him now to speak of it.
Even as a bachelor equips himself, nor speaks until the master states the question, to furnish proofs, but not decide the same, so I, while she was speaking, armed myself with every proof, that I might ready be for such a questioner and such confession.
Speak now, good Christian, and declare thyself. What, then, is faith?
Thereat I raised my brow toward the bright light from which these words were breathed, and then I turned around toward Beatrice, and she by rapid signals bade me pour the water forth from my internal fount. The grace which grants that I confess myself before the first centurion, I began, cause my conceptions to be well expressed. And I continued, as the truthful pen of thy dear brother, Father, who with thee set Rome upon the right way, wrote of it, faith is the substance of the hoped-for things, and the evidence of those that are not seen. This seems to me its essence. Then I heard,
Thou thinkest right, if well thou understand why with the substances he placed it first, and with the evidences afterward.
Thereat I answered, those deep truths which here are freely making themselves known to me, from eyes down yonder, are so far concealed that their existence lies in faith alone, and thereupon the lofty hope is based. It therefore takes the nature of a substance, and from this faith one needs must syllogize without the help of any other sight. It therefore assumes the nature of an evidence. And then I heard,
If thus were understood all that for doctrine is acquired below, there'd be no room there for the sophist's mind.
These words were breathed from that enkindled love, which added then,
Already have this coin's alloy and weight been very well examined. But tell me, if thou hast it in thy purse.
I therefore, yes, so shining and so round, that nothing in its coinage makes me doubt. Then issued from the deep light shining there,
Whence did this precious jewel come to thee, whereon all virtues else are based?
And I, The abundant showers of the Holy Spirit outpoured upon the parchments old and new, a syllogism have formed, which prove it true so clearly to me that all other proofs seem inconclusive when compared with it.
The ancient premise and the new,
I then heard asked,
which so conclusive are to thee, why dost thou take them for the word of God?
And I, the proof which showeth me the truth, are those great works which followed, works for which nature ne'er heated iron, nor anvil smote. Then I was answered,
Say what makes thee sure that those works e'er occurred. The very thing which calls for proof, none other, tells thee so.
If to Christianity the world was turned, I said, unhelped by miracles, then this is such, that not 100th are the rest. For thou didst poor and fasting go afield, to sow the goodly plant, which was of old a vine, and now has turned into a thorn. This ending thus, the high and holy court resounded through the spheres a
God we praise.
Sung to the melody they sing up there. That Baron then, who thus from branch to branch had tested me, and now had led me on, until the final leaves were drawing near, began again.
The grace which with thy mind holds loving converse, hitherto hath oped thy mouth as it should be. Hence I approve of that which it hath uttered. But it now behoves thee say what thou believest in, and whence it has been offered to thy faith.
O Holy Father, Spirit that dost now behold what thou didst so believe, that thou didst outrun toward the tomb far younger feet, I thus began. Thou'dst have me now reveal the essential part of my sincere belief, and thou dost also ask the cause of it. And I reply, in one God I believe, sole and eternal, who, himself unmoved, moves all the heavens with love and with desire. And I, for so believing, have not only proofs physical and metaphysical, but that truth also yieldeth me its proof, which hence rains down through Moses, Psalms, and prophets, and through the Gospel, and through you, who wrote after the flaming Spirit made you shepherds. And I believe in 3 eternal persons, and these to be one essence, so both one and trine, that they can be conjoined by are and is. Of the divine profound estate whereto I now refer, the teaching of the Gospel sets many times the seal upon my mind. This is the fountainhead, and this the spark, which after spreads into a living flame, and in me glows, as stars do in the sky. As when a lord, hearing what pleases him, rejoices in the news his servant brings, and takes him to his arms when he is silent, so, giving me his blessing as he sang, that apostolic light, at whose command I spoke, when I had ceased,
Section 92 of the Divine Comedy by Dante Alighieri, translated by Courtney Langdon. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Paradiso, Canto 25. The Eighth or Starry Heaven. The Twins. Triumphant Spirits. St. James examines Dante on Hope.
If e'er it happen that the sacred poem, to which both heaven and earth have so set hand that it hath made me lean for many years, o'ercome the fierceness which against me bars the lovely fold, where as a lamb I slept, though hostile to the wolves that give it war, then with another voice and other fleece a poet I'll return, and at the font of mine own baptism take the laurel crown. For there I entered first into the faith, which makes souls known to God, and Peter later, because of my belief, thus wreathed my brow. Then toward us, after this, there moved a light out of the sphere, from which the first fruit issued, which of his vicars Christ once left behind. And full of joy, my lady said to me,
Look, look, behold the Baron for whose sake men go to see Galicia down on earth.
As when a dove alighteth near its mate, each, by its circling and its cooing, shows the other its affection, thus I saw one great and glorious prince the other greet, and praise the food which sateth them up there. But when their mutual gratulations ceased, before me each in silence stopped, and flamed so brightly that my face was forced to bow. Then smiling Beatrice,
Illustrious life, by whom the generous liberality of our basilica was once described, let hope resound upon these heavenly heights. Thou knowest that thou didst stand for it, as oft as Jesus showed most brightness to the three.
Lift up thy head, and reassure thyself, for all that cometh from the mortal world up hither must be ripened in our rays.
This comfort reached me from the second fire. Hence to the hills I raised mine eyes, which erst had bowed them down by their excessive weight.
Since of his graciousness our Emperor wills that thou before thy death shouldest face his counts in his most secret hall, that having seen the truth in this our court, thou mayest confirm, both in thyself and other souls, the hope which rightfully enamours men on earth. Say what it is, and how therewith thy mind is blossoming, and whence it came to thee.
Thus further did the second light proceed, and that kind soul who to so high a flight had led the feathers of my wings forestalled my answer thus.
No child of greater hope hath the Church militant, as in the sun is written, which irradiates all our band. It, therefore, hath been granted him to come from Egypt to Jerusalem, and see, or ere the period of his warfare end. Thine other two requests, made not for knowledge, but so that he may carry back with him to what extent this virtue pleases thee, I leave to him, for they will not be hard for him, nor matter for self-praise. To these let him reply, and may God's grace assist him.
Even as in that wherein he expert is, a pupil readily and willingly answers his teacher, that his worth be shown. Hope is, I said, a steadfast expectation of future glory, which by grace divine and by preceding merit is produced. This light from many stars comes down to me, but he into my heart instilled it first, who was the greatest leader's greatest bard. For let them hope in thee that know thy name, the latter in his Theody declares. And if he have my faith, who knows it not? Then thou with his instilling didst so greatly instil that hope in me with thine epistle, that filled with it I pour your rain on others. While I was speaking, in the living bosom of that great fire, a bright effulgence quivered quickly and often, like a lightning flash, and then it breathed.
The love wherewith I still warm to the virtue which once followed me, till with the palm I issued from the field, would have me give my breath to thee again, that dost therein delight, and I am pleased to have thee say what promise hope affords thee.
And I, the Scriptures, both the new and old, the goal establish of the souls whom God hath made his friends. This points it out to me. Isaiah says that each in his own land will in a double garment be arrayed, and his own land is this sweet life of ours. And in a more explicit way thy brother makes this same revelation manifest to us, where of the snow-white robes he treats. After these words had ended, first was heard above us,
Let them hope in thee.
whereto all of the carols made reply, and then a light became so brilliant in their midst that, if the crab had such a crystal star, winter would have a month of one sole day. And as a happy maiden rising goes in honour of the bride to join the dance, and not for any failing on her part, even so I saw the splendour, brighter grown, approach the two who in a wheel were turning, as it behoved the ardour of their love. Into the song and music then it entered, and on the three my lady kept her gaze, silent and motionless as would a bride.
This is the one who on his breast reclined, who is our pelican, and from the cross selected was to hold the filial office.
Even thus my lady spoke, but no more after did her words withdraw her eyes from fixed attention than before. Even as is he who gazes at the sun and tries to see it partially eclipsed, and who, because of seeing, groweth blind, such I became before that latest fire, till this was said,
Why dost thou blind thyself? to see a thing which hath no being here. Earth is my body on the earth, and there will with the others stay, until our number shall with the eternal purpose correspond. With both their garments in the blessed cloister are those two lights alone, which hither rose, and this shalt thou take back unto your world.
Stilled was the flaming circle at these words, and with them that sweet mixture which was formed out of the music of the threefold breath, as from fatigue or danger to escape, oars, which had stroked the water just before, are at a whistle's sound all brought to rest. Ah, how disturbed in mind I then became, when I turned round to look at Beatrice.
Section 93 of the Divine Comedy by Dante Alighieri, translated by Courtney Langdon. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Paradiso, Canto 26. The Eighth or Starry Heaven. The Twins. St. John examines Dante on love. Adam.
While I was frightened by my loss of vision from the refulgent flaming which had quenched it, a breath, which caused me to give heed, came forth and said,
Till thou regain the sense of sight, which thou hast spent by gazing up at me, 'tis well that thou make up for it by speech. Therefore begin to speak, and say toward what thy soul aspires, and also bear in mind that sight in thee is lost, but not destroyed, because the lady who is leading thee through this divine expanse hath in her look the power possessed by Ananias' hand.
At her own pleasure, soon or late, I said, let the cure reach the eyes which portals were, when with that fire she entered, wherewithal I ever burn. The good which sates this court is Alpha and Omega of all scriptures love reads to me in tones or low or loud. And that same voice which rid me of the fear the sudden blinding blaze had given me, inspired me with a wish to speak again, and said,
Thou surely through a finer sieve must pass thy meaning. It behooves thee say who toward so great a target turn thy bow.
And I, by philosophic arguments, and by authority which from up here descends, must such a love needs stamp itself on me. Because the good, when understood as such, enkindles love, and all the greater love, the more it holds of goodness in itself. Hence to that being who so perfect is, that every good which lies outside of him is nothing but a beam of his own radiance. More than to any other must the mind in love be moved, of all who recognize the truth on which this argument is based. He to mine understanding shows this truth, who demonstrates to me the primal love of all the sempiternal substances. The truthful author's voice revealeth it, when, speaking of himself, he saith to Moses, All goodness shall I have thee see. Thou, too, revealest it to me when thou beginnest the loud announcement which o'er other trumps heralds on earth the secrets of this state. Thereat I heard,
By human understanding, and by authorities therewith concordant, the sovereign of thy loves is turned to God. But further say, if other chords thou feel attract thee toward him, so that thou mayst say how many of love's teeth are biting thee.
Not hidden was the purpose of Christ's eagle. Nay, rather I perceived to what he wished to lead my love's profession to declare. Hence all those bitings, I began again, which possibly could turn one's heart to God, have with my love of him concurrent been. For both the world's existence and mine own, the death which he endured that I might live, and that which all the faithful hope, as I, together with the mentioned living knowledge, have drawn me from the sea of wrong desires, and set me on the shore of righteous love. I love the several leaves wherewith enleaved is all the garden of the eternal gardener. According to the good he giveth each. As soon as I had ceased, a most sweet song throughout all heaven resounded, and my lady said,
Holy, holy, holy.
With the rest. And even as at a vivid flash of light one wakes from sleep, because one's visual power turns toward the ray which moves from coat to coat, And as the one awakened shrinketh back from that which he hath seen, so senseless is his sudden waking, till reflection helps. Thus Beatrice drove all motes from mine eyes, by the mere radiance of her own, whose light shone further than 1,000 miles away. I therefore saw far better than before. Then, since I was amazed at it, I asked about a fourth light I beheld with us. My lady then,
In yonder radiant light, the first soul which the first power e'er created is gazing joyfully upon his Maker.
even as a bough which, while the wind is passing, bends its top down, and then uplifts itself, by innate strength which raises it again, even so did I, amazed, while she was speaking. And then the wish to speak wherewith I burned made me feel reassured, and I began, O fruit that wast alone produced when ripe, O ancient Father, thou to whom each bride is both a daughter and a daughter-in-law, I beg thee as devoutly as I can to speak to me. Thou seest my wish, hence I, that I may quickly hear thee, tell it not. At times a covered animal so stirs that its own movement needs must be revealed, because its covering corresponds to it. So likewise did the first of souls display to me, through that which covered it, how gladly he came to give me pleasure. Then it breathed.
Without it being told to me by thee, better do I perceive what thou desirest, than thou perceivest what thou knowest best. For I behold it in the truthful mirror, which of itself makes other things a likeness, though naught makes it a likeness of itself. Thou fain wouldst hear how long it is since God in that high garden placed me, where this lady prepared thee for so long a flight of stairs. How long it was a pleasure to mine eyes, the real occasion for the mighty wrath, and what the tongue which I both used and made. Now, son, the tasting of the tree was not itself the cause of such a banishment, but only the transgression of the bound. In that place, whence thy lady started Virgil, I hence for this assembly longed 4,300 revolutions of the sun, and 2. And him I saw return again to all his highways lights 900 times and 30, while I still abode on earth. The tongue I spoke had quite extinct become a long time ere the people under Nimrod attempted their unfinished task. For never was a product of man's reason apt to endure, for human appetite renews itself according to the heavens. That mankind speaks a work of nature is, but if in this or that way, nature then leaves you to do according to your pleasure. Ere I descended to the grieving place below, the highest good, from whom proceeds the joy which swathes me, was on earth called I. El was he called thereafter. This must be, for human custom is, as on a bough a leaf, which goeth as another comes. Upon the mount which highest from the sea ascends, I lived in innocence and sin, from the first hour until the
Section 94 of the Divine Comedy by Dante Alighieri, translated by Courtney Langdon. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Paradiso, Canto 27, the 8th or Starry Heaven, St. Peter's Invective, the 9th Heaven, Primum Mobile, the Angelic Hierarchies.
All paradise in such a way began that its sweet song intoxicated me. What I was seeing seemed to me a smile as of the universe. for through both sight and hearing my intoxication entered. O joy, O gladness inexpressible! O life by love and peace completely filled! O wealth no longer longed for, but assured! Before mine eyes the torches four remained on fire, and that which was the first to come began to grow more luminous, and such in its appearance it became, as Jove would come to be, if he and Mars were birds, and interchanged the plumage of their wings. The Providence, which there above assigns both turn and office, silence had imposed upon the blessed choir on every side, when,
If I change my colour, marvel not,
I heard him say,
for even while I am speaking, thou shalt behold all these change colour too. He who on earth usurps my place, which in the sight of God's own Son is vacant, of my burial ground hath made a sewer of blood and stench, whereby the pervert who fell from hence is there below appeased.
The whole of heaven I then beheld o'erspread with that same hue which colours clouds both morn and evening when the sun lies opposite. And as a modest lady, who feels sure of her own self, but at another's fault, on merely hearing of it, timid grows, so Beatrice changed her appearance then. And such as hers, I think, was heaven's eclipse, what time the sovereign power suffered pain. Thereat his words proceeded in a voice so changed from what had been its wonted self, that his appearance had no further changed.
The bride of Christ was not by my blood fed, nor by the blood of Linus, nor by that of Cletus, to be used for gain of gold, but for the winning of this happy life. Both Sixtus, Pius, Urban, and Calixtus, after much lamentation, shed their blood. It was not our purpose that upon the right of our successors one part of the folk of Christ should sit, and on the left another, nor that the keys bestowed in trust on me should on a banner come to be an emblem, and warfare wage on those that were baptized, nor I become an image on a seal for privileges venal and deceptive, which often make me blush and flame with wrath. Rapacious wolves, disguised in shepherd's clothes, are seen in all the pastures from up here. Vengeance of God, why art thou quiet still? Men of Cahors and Gascons even now prepare to drink our blood. O good beginning, to what vile ending thou art doomed to fall! But that high Providence, which saved for Rome, through Scipio's help, the glory of the world, will quickly succour her, as I conceive. And thou, my son, who for thy mortal weight art to return below, open thy mouth, and hide not that which I do not conceal.
Even as our atmosphere lets fall great flakes of frozen vapour, when the horn of heaven's she-goat is in conjunction with the sun, so I beheld the sky grow beautiful and upward flaked with those triumphant flames which for a while had sojourned with us there. My sight was following their forms, and followed till the mid-space, by reason of its vastness, prevented it from passing further on. Thereat the lady, who had seen that freed I was from gazing up, said,
Lower now thine eyes, and see how far thou hast revolved.
I saw that since the hour when I had first looked downward, I had moved through all the arc the first of climates makes from mid to end. Past Cadiz hence, Ulysses' insane track I saw, and nearly to the seashore where Europa made herself so sweet a load. And of this little threshing floor much more would have been shown me, but the sun was circling beneath my feet, a sign or more removed. And my enamoured mind, which in my lady always takes pleasure, More than ever now was burning to restore mine eyes to her. And if or art or nature e'er made baits in human flesh or in its painted forms, to catch men's eyes, and capture thus their minds, they altogether would seem naught compared to that divine delight which on me shone, when to her smiling face I turned around. The virtue, therefore, which that look vouchsafed, removed me from fair Leda's lovely nest, and urged me on into the swiftest heaven. Its nearest and its most exalted parts are all so uniform, I cannot tell which Beatrice selected as my place. But she who saw my wish began to speak, and smiled so happily, that God appeared to be rejoicing in her countenance.
The nature of the world, which quiet holds the centre, and around it moves the rest, beginneth here, as from its starting point. And this heaven hath no other where than in the mind divine, where kindled is the love which turns it, and the power itself rains down. One circle's light and love encircle it, as it the other heavens, and he alone this precinct understands who girdeth it. Its motion is not measured by another, but all the others are by this, as 10 is measured by its half and by its fifth. And now how time in such a flower-port can have its hidden roots, and in the rest its leaves, hereafter can be manifest to thee. O thou cupidity, that neath thyself dost sink all mortals so, that none avails out of thy waters to withdraw his eyes. The will in human beings blossoms well, but constant rains turn into blighted fruit the genuine plums. And faith and innocence are found in children only, but take flight before their cheeks are covered up with hair. While still a prattler, one observeth fasts, who later, when his tongue is free, devours under whatever moon whatever food, and one who, while still lisping, loves and hearkens to his mother, later on when speaking well would see her in her grave. Thus in the primal sight becometh black the white face of the lovely child of him who brings the morn and leaves the eventide. And that thou marvel not at this, recall that there is none on earth who rules, and hence the human family goes thus astray, and yet ere January's month became wholly unwintered, through the 100th part neglected there below, these upper spheres shall roar so that the storm so long foreseen will turn the sterns to where the Section 95 of the Divine Comedy by Dante Alighieri, translated by Courtney Langdon. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Paradiso Canto 28, the 9th Heaven, Primum Mobile, the Angelic Hierarchies. The point, the 9 orders of angels and the 9 heavens.
After the truth against the present life of wretched mortals had been shown to me by her who lifts my mind to paradise, as in a mirror he perceives its flame, who from behind is lighted by a torch, before he has it in his sight or thought, and turns around to notice if the glass have told the truth, and sees that it accords therewith, as with its music's time a song. So likewise now my memory recalls that I did, as I gazed in those fair eyes, whence love had made accord to capture me. And as I turned around, and mine were touched by that which in that sphere becomes apparent, whene'er one looks intently at its centre, a point I saw, which rays out light so keen that eyes which it enkindles needs must close by reason of its great intensity. And any star that from down here seems smallest would seem to be a moon, if set beside it, as at each other's side the stars are set. Perhaps as near as e'er a halo seems to gird the light around, which colours it, when densest is the air which gives it form. A ring of fire was whirling round the point so swiftly that it would have overcome the motion which most quickly girds the world. And by another this was girt around, that by a third, as this one by a fourth, then by a fifth the fourth, and by a sixth the fifth. The 7th came next. Outside of these so widely spread that Juno's messenger, fully circled, were too narrow to contain it. Like these the 8th ring and the 9th, and each more slowly moved, as in its order's number it whirled at greater distance from the first. And that one had the clearest flame of all, whence the pure spark least distant was, because, I think, it most intruths itself therein. My lady, who profoundly lost in thought beheld me, said to me,
On yonder point heaven and the whole of nature are dependent. Look at the circle most conjoined to it, and know thou that it moves so rapidly because spurred onward by its burning love.
And I to her, if ordered were the world as I perceive it is in yonder wheels, what is before me set had sated me. But in the world of sense all revolutions may be perceived to be the more divine, as from the centre they are more remote. Hence, if my longing is to be appeased in this mirific and angelic temple, whose only boundaries are light and love, 'tis fit that I hear further why the example and its exemplar do not correspond, for by myself I think on this in vain.
No wonder is it, if for such a knot thy fingers insufficient are, so hard hath it become through lack of being tried.
My lady thus. She then continued,
Take what I shall tell thee, wouldst thou sated be, and on it subtly concentrate thy mind. The embodied circles wide or narrow are according to the more or less of virtue distributed through all their several parts. A greater goodness makes for greater weal. A greater body greater weal bespeaks, if all its parts are perfect equally. Hence that which with itself sweeps onward all the universe remaining, corresponds to yonder circle which most loves and knows. If, then, thou stretch thy measure round the virtue, not round the appearance, of the substances which seem arranged in circles to thy sight, thou'lt see a marvellous conformity, of more to larger, and of less to smaller, in every heaven to its intelligence.
Even as the hemisphere of air remains resplendent and serene, when Boreas blows out of the cheek from which he mildest proves, whereby the fog which troubled it before is cleansed and cleared, until the welkin smiles upon us with the charms of all its wards. Even such did I become, when once my lady had with her clear reply provided me, and like a star in heaven the truth was seen. And when her words had ceased, not otherwise doth iron when still boiling scintillate, than yonder circles sparkled. Every spark followed its kindler, and so many were they, that their whole number far more thousands counts than ever did the doubling of the chess. From choir to choir I heard Hosanna sung to that fixed point which holds them at the where, and ever will, where they have always been. And she who in my mind my doubtful thoughts was seeing, said,
The primal rings have shown the seraphs to thee, and the cherubim. Thus swiftly do they heed their bonds, to make them as like the point as may be, and as like it they can be as their vision is sublime. Those other loves that round about them move, thrones of countenance divine are called, and for this reason end the primal triad. And thou shouldst know that all of them are happy, according as their vision plumbs the truth, wherein all understanding is at rest. From this it may be seen how blessedness is founded on the faculty which sees, and not on that which loves and follows after. The measure of this vision is the merit which both of grace and of goodwill is born. Such, then, is their advance from grade to grade. The second triad, which, like that above, produces buds in this eternal spring, whose foliage no nocturnal Aries spoils, sings endlessly its vernal song of praise to three sweet melodies, which sound in three orders of joy, wherewith it shrines itself. Three goddesses are in that hierarchy. The dominations first, the virtues next. The third one is the order of the powers. Then, in the last two dancing choirs but one, with principalities archangels whirl. The last is wholly of angelic joys. All these angelic orders upward look, and downward so prevail, that all to God attracted are, and all in turn attract. And Dionysius with such great desire gave himself up to contemplate these orders, that he both named and graded them as I, but with him later Gregory disagreed, and hence, as soon as ever in this heaven he oped his eyes, at his own self he smiled. Nor would I have thee wonder that on earth a mortal should disclose Section 96 of the Divine Comedy by Dante Alighieri, translated by Courtney Langdon. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Paradiso, Canto 29, the ninth heaven, Primum Mobile, the angelic hierarchies, the creation, the nature, and the number of the angels.
When, by the ram and by the scales surmounted, both children of Latona make together a girdle of the earth's horizon line, as long as from the moment when the zenith holds them in equipoise, till from that girdle both free themselves by changing hemisphere. Only so long did Beatrice keep silent, a smile her face adorning, as she gazed intently on the point which vanquished me. She then began,
I tell, but do not ask, what thou art fain to hear, for I have seen it where every where and every when is fixed, not for gain of good unto himself, which is not possible, but that his splendour might in resplendency declare I am in his eternity, outside of time, out of all limits else, the eternal love, as pleased him, in new loves disclosed himself. Nor yet ere this did he remain inert, for neither after nor before occurred God's going to and fro upon these waters. Both form and matter, simple and conjoined, came into being which had no defect, even as 3 arrows from a 3-stringed bow, and as in glass, in amber, or in crystal a ray so shines, that from the time it comes till its completion is no interval. Thus from its Lord did that triform effect ray forth into its being all at once, without distinction as to its beginning. Order was concreate, and for the substances ordained. The highest in the world were those in whom activity was brought forth pure. Pure potentiality the lowest place assumed, and 'tween these two so strong a bond activity and potentiality conjoined, that never will it be unbound. Jerome, concerning angels, wrote for you that their creation was an age-long tract of time before the remnant world was made. But written is this truth in many places by writers of the Holy Ghost, and there thou'lt see it, if but carefully thou look. And reason, too, sees this to some extent, for it could not acknowledge that the motors could be so long deprived of their perfection. And now thou knowest where and when these loves created were, and how. Hence in thy longing 3 ardours have already been extinguished. Nor, counting, would one reach as far as 20, as quickly as a portion of the angels disturbed the lowest of your elements. The rest remained, and with such great delight began the art which thou beholdest here, that never from their circling have they ceased. The fall's occasion was the cursed pride of him whom thou didst see oppressed by all the burdens of the world. Those whom thou here beholdest modest were, and recognized themselves as from that goodness sprung which apt had made them for such great intelligence. And therefore, by illuminating grace and by their merit, was their sight so raised that now a full and steadfast will is theirs. Nor would I have thee doubt, but be assured that to receive God's grace is meritorious, according as affection opes to it. And now, concerning this consistory, much canst thou contemplate without more help, if thou hast apprehended well my words. But seeing that on earth throughout your schools men teach that such the angelic nature is, that it both understands, recalls, and wills, I'll further speak that thou the simple truth mayst see, which there below confounded is, because the doctrine taught equivocates. These substances, ere since the face of God first gladdened them, have not withdrawn their eyes therefrom, whence nothing is concealed. They have no vision which is interrupted, therefore, by objects new to them, and hence need not remember by divided thought. Folk, therefore, dream down there, though not asleep, some thinking that their words are true, some not. But greater is the latter's sin and shame. And ye down yonder follow not one path when ye philosophize, so much doth the love of show, and being famed for it, transport you. And yet with even less disdain is this endured up here, than when the Holy Scripture is set aside or turned to wrong account. No one considers there how much it costs to sow it in the world, or how much he, who humbly clings to it, gives pleasure here. Each strives to call attention to himself, making his own inventions. These are taught by preachers, while the gospel's voice is stilled. One says that while the Christ was suffering death, the moon turned back and interposed herself, and hence the sun's light failed to reach the earth. Others that of its own accord the light concealed itself, hence its eclipse affected Spaniards and Hindus as it did the Jews. Florence hath not so many Lapi and Bindi as fables such as these, which all year long are shouted from the pulpits everywhere. Hence the poor sheep who do not know return from pasture fed on wind, nor doth the fact that they see not that they are harmed excuse them. Christ did not say to his first company, Go and preach idle stories to the world, but gave them a foundation for the truth, and that alone found utterance from their lips. Therefore, when striving to enkindle faith, they use the gospel as their shield and lance. Men now go forth to preach with jests and tricks, and so if but a hearty laugh is raised, the cowl puffs up, and nothing more is asked. But in its tail there nests such a bird, that if the crowd perceived it, it would see what that forgiveness is in which it trusts. Therefore such folly hath increased on earth, that without proof or other attestation, to any kind of promise men would flock. St. Anthony is fattening thus his pig, and others also fouler far than his by paying money void of coinage stamp. But since a great digression we have made, turn thine eyes backward to the straight road now, that thus our way be shortened with our time. This nature so exceedingly extends in number, that there never was or speech or mortal thought that could extend so far. And if thou look at that which is disclosed by Daniel, thou wilt see that in his thousands no well-determined number is revealed. The primal light, which rays out on it all, is in as many ways therein received, as are the lights wherewith it pairs itself. Hence, since affection follows on the act which understands, love's sweetness is therein burning or warm in different degrees. And see how exceeding high and broad is that Section 97 of the Divine Comedy by Dante Alighieri, translated by Courtney Langdon. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Paradiso Canto 30. The Empyrean, God, the Angels and the Blessed, the River of Light, the Mystic Rose, the Throne of Henry VII.
The 6th hour glows perhaps 6,000 miles away from us, and now our world inclines its shadow to a near-by level bed. Mid-heaven the while, which lies so deep above us, is growing such, that now and then a star is lost to our perception here below. Till, as the brightest handmaid of the sun advances further, star by star, the sky, even to the fairest, closes to our view. Not otherwise the triumph, which forever plays round about the point which vanquished me, and seems contained by what itself contains, little by little faded from my sight. My seeing nothing, therefore, and my love forced me to look again at Beatrice. If what has hitherto been said of her were all included in a single praise, but little would it serve my present turn. The beauty which I then beheld transcends not us alone, but truly I believe its Maker only can enjoy it all. And herewith I confess myself o'erwhelmed, more than a tragic or a comic poet was ever by a crisis in his theme. For as the sun the sight that trembles most, so the remembrance of her lovely smile deprives my memory of its very self. From the first day when I beheld her face in this life, till this present sight of it, I've never ceased from following her in song, but now must my pursuit desist from tracing her beauty's progress further in my verse, as at his utmost every artist must. Such as I leave her to a louder cry than that of mine own trump, which draweth now its arduous matter to its closing, she, with a quick leader's mien and voice, resumed.
We now have issued from the greatest body into the heaven, which is itself pure light. Light intellectual, which is full of love, love of true goodness, which is full of joy, joy which transcendeth every kind of pleasure. Here both the soldieries of paradise shalt thou behold, and one in that array, which at the final judgment thou shalt see.
Like a quick lightning flash which scatters so the visual faculties that it prevents the eyes reacting to the brightest objects. Even so a living light around me shone, and left me swathed about by such a veil of its effulgence that I lost my sight.
The love which calms this last heaven always welcomes into its midst by greetings such as these, and thus adapts the candle to the flame.
No sooner had these brief few words of hers attained mine inner ear, than I perceived that I was being raised above my powers. Hence with new sight I so rekindled me, that there cannot exist so bright a light that now mine eyes could not endure to see it. Light in a river's form I then beheld, which glowed refulgently between two banks, adorned with wondrous hues of early spring. And from this river issued living sparks, which settled everywhere among the flowers, and looked like rubies set in gold. and then, as if intoxicated by its odours, into the wondrous river plunged again, another coming out, if one went in.
The deep desire which now inflameth thee and urges thee to know what thou art seeing, the better pleases me, the more it grows. But of this water it behoves thee drink before so great a thirst as thine is slaked.
So said to me the sunlight of mine eyes.
The river and the topaz lights which come and go,
she added,
and the smiling grass are prefaces foreshadowing their truth. Not that imperfect in themselves they are, but that deficiency exists in thee, because thy sight is not yet strong enough.
There is no little child that turns its face so quickly toward its milk, on waking up much later than hath been its wont, as I, to make far better mirrors of mine eyes, leaned over toward the stream, which only flows that we therein may be the better made. Soon as mine eyelids' eaves had drunk of it, it seemed to me transformed from long to round. And then, like folk who under masks have been, and different seem from what they were before, when once divested of the alien looks, wherein their self had disappeared, even so the flowers and sparks had changed themselves for me into a feast far greater, so that clearly I now beheld both courts of heaven revealed. O splendour of my God, whereby I saw the exalted triumph of the realm of truth, give me the power to tell what I perceived. There is a light up yonder, which allows its Maker to be seen by every creature which only hath its peace in seeing him. And in a circle's form it spreadeth out to such extent that its circumference would be too broad a girdle for the sun. Its whole appearance from a ray proceeds, reflected from the summit of the first moved sphere, which from it takes its life and potency. And as within the water at its base a hill reflects itself, as if to see its slopes adorned, when rich with leaves and flowers. Thus, ranged above, and all around the light, mirrored on o'er 1,000 tiers, I saw all that of us have yet returned up there. And if the lowest row within itself gathers so great a light, how great must be this rose's width in its remotest petals! Nor did my vision of its breadth or height lose itself in them, but embraced the whole extent and inmost nature of this joy. There near nor far, nor add nor take away, for there where God unmediated rules, in no way doth the natural law obtain. Into the yellow of the eternal rose, which outward spreads in tears, whose fragrance praises the sun which makes an everlasting spring, was I, like one who, fain to speak, keeps silent, led on by Beatrice, who said to me,
Behold how vast the white-robed convent is. Behold how wide the circuit of our town. Behold our benches so completely filled that few are now the people longed for here. On that great seat whereon thine eyes are fixed by reason of the crown which rests there now, or ere thou sup at this our wedding feast, shall sit the soul, august to be below, of that great Henry who shall come to set Italia straight, ere she shall be prepared. The blinding greed which now bewitches you hath made you mortals like a child, who, though he die of hunger, drives his nurse away. And in the sacred forum such a one shall prefect be, that he'll not go one road with him, in open or covert ways, but in his holy office he will not be long endured by God. Section 98 of the Divine Comedy by Dante Alighieri, translated by Courtney Langdon. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Paradiso, Canto 31. The Empyrean, God, the Angels and the Blessed, Saint Bernard, Dante's last words with Beatrice, the glory of Mary.
In semblance, therefore, of a pure white rose, the sacred soldiery with which his blood Christ made his bride revealed itself to me. Meanwhile the other host, which flying sees the glory of him who wins its love, and sings the goodness which had made them all so great, was like a swarm of bees, which now enflowers itself, and now returns to where its toil is sweetened, ever coming down to enter the spacious flower, which with so many leaves adorns itself, and reascending thence to where its love for ever makes his home. The faces of them all were living flames, their wings were golden, and the rest so white, that never is such whiteness reached by snow. When down into the flower they came, they spread from bench to bench the peace and ardent love, which by the fanning of their sides they won. Nor did so vast a host of flying forms between the flower and that which o'er it lies hinder the sight or dim the splendour seen, because the light divine so penetrates the universe according to its worth, that naught can be an obstacle thereto. And this secure and joyous kingdom, thronged by people of the ages old and new, wholly on one mark set its looks and love. O trinal light, that in a single star sparkling before their eyes dost so appease them, look down upon our tempest here below. If the barbarians, coming from a region above which Elice looms every day, while circling with the sun who is her joy, on seeing Rome and all her lofty buildings, what time the Lateran rose eminent o'er every mortal thing, were wonder-struck, how overwhelmed with awe must I have been, I who from human things to things divine, from time into eternity had come, from Florence, to a people just and sane. Because of this indeed, and of my joy, it pleased me to be mute and hear no sound. And even as in the temple of his vow, when hoping to describe it all some day, a pilgrim looks around him and is cheered, even so, while wandering through the living light, I turned mine eyes on all the graded ranks, circling now up, now down, and now around. There love-persuasive faces I beheld, decked by another's light and their own smiles, and gestures fraught with grace and dignity. My look now as a whole had comprehended the general form of paradise, but had not yet settled especially on any part. And I was longing with rekindled wish to ask my lady as to many things concerning which my mind was in suspense, though one thing I had meant, another answered. Thinking to look at Beatrice, an elder I saw arrayed as other glorious folk. His eyes and cheeks were all suffused with joy and kindliness, and such his pious mien, as fitting is a father's tenderness. Hence, where is she? I said impulsively, and he,
To bring thy longing to an end was I by Beatrice from mine own place withdrawn. And if upon the highest rank's third round thou look, thou shalt again behold her enthroned where her deserts allotted her.
Without reply I lifted up mine eyes, and saw her, as reflecting from herself the eternal rays, she made herself a crown. Not from the tract whence highest thunder's peal is any mortal eye so far removed from whatsoever sea it fathoms most, as Beatrice was distant from mine eyes. But naught was that to me, because her face came down to me unblurred by aught between. O Lady, thou in whom my hope is strong, and who for my salvation didst endure to leave the traces of thy feet in hell, I recognize the virtue and the grace of all the many things which I have seen, as coming from thy power and kindliness. From slavery to freedom thou hast drawn me in every way, and over every path, within thy power to achieve that end. Guard thou in me the fruitage of thy bounty, that thus my soul, restored to health by thee, may, when it leaves my body, please thee still. I thus implored, and she, though so far off she seemed, looked down at me and smiled. Then to the eternal fount she turned again. Thereat the holy elder said,
That thou mayst bring thy journey to its perfect end, for which both prayers and holy love have sent me, hover about this garden with thine eyes, for to have seen it will prepare thy look to rise still higher through the ray divine. The Queen of Heaven, for whom I wholly burn with love, will grant us this and very grace, for I her faithful servant Bernard am.
As he who from Croatia comes, perchance, to look at our Veronica, and who, because of its old fame, is never sated, but says in thought, as long as it is shown, My Lord, Christ Jesus, God in very truth, was then your countenance like unto this? Even such was I, as on the living love I gazed on him, who in this world received a taste in contemplation of that peace.
This glad existence, Son of Grace,
he then began,
will not be known to thee, if fixed at this low level only are thine eyes. Look at the circles, to the most remote, till yonder thou behold that queen enthroned, to whom devoutly subject is this realm.
I raised mine eyes, and as at early morn the horizon's eastern parts excel in light the regions where the sun is setting, so, as with mine eyes from vale to mount I moved, I saw a region at the utmost verge vanquish in light all other parts before me. And as the skies, where one awaits the car which Phaeton badly drove, more brightly gleam, while pale the light on either side becomes, so likewise brilliant in the middle loomed that peaceful oriflamme, and on each side the fire in equal measure burned less bright. And clustered there with wings outspread I saw more than 1,000 angels jubilant, and each distinct in splendour and in speed. While smiling down upon their sports and songs a beauty I beheld, who was the joy within the eyes of all the other saints. And even if I in utterance were as rich as in imagination, I'd not dare attempt to tell the least of its delight. When Bernard saw mine eyes intently fixed upon the object of his ardent love,
Section 99 of the Divine Comedy by Dante Alighieri, translated by Courtney Langdon. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Paradiso, Canto 32. The Empyrean, God. The Angels and the Blessed. The Order of the Rose. The Blessed Children. The Great Patricians.
Intent on his delight, that contemplator the office of a teacher took unasked, and thereupon began these holy words.
The one so beautiful at Mary's feet is she who opened and who made the wound, which Mary closed again, and then anointed. In the order which up there the third seats make, Rachel beneath her sits with Beatrice, as thou perceivest, Sarah, Rebecca, Judith, and she who was that singer's ancestress, who said when he was grieving for his sin, Have mercy on me. Thou canst thus behold downward from rank to rank, as each I name, and through the rows decline from leaf to leaf. Descending from the seventh row of seats, even as above it, Hebrew women follow, dividing all the tresses of the flower. For in accordance with the attitude their faith assumed toward Christ, these women form the wall which separates the sacred steps. On this side, where full-bloomed the flower is, complete with all its leaves, are seated those who in the Christ that was to come believed, and on the other, where the semicircles are interrupted by still vacant seats, are those who face toward Christ already come. And as on this side here the glorious throne of heaven's own Lady, and the other seats beneath it such a great partition make, so opposite the seat of that great John, who, ever holy, underwent the desert and martyrdom, and then 2 years in Hades, while Francis, Benedict, and Augustine beneath him were decreed to form the line with others down to here, from round to round. And now behold how great God's foresight is, for each of these 2 aspects of the faith will fill this garden to the same extent. And know that downward from the row of seats which midway separates the 2 divisions, no one is seated for his own deserts, but for another's, under fixed conditions. For all of these are spirits who were freed before they had the power to really choose. This by their faces thou canst well perceive, and by their childish voices furthermore, if, looking at them well, thou listen too. Thou doubtest now, and doubting thou art silent, but I will set thee free from that strong bond wherein thy subtle thoughts are holding thee. Within the ample nature of this realm, nothing can any more occur by chance, than either sadness, thirst, or hunger can. For in accordance with eternal law is settled all thou seest, so that here close fitting to the finger is the ring. These people, therefore, who before their time have reached true life, are not without good cause more excellent or less among themselves. The king, through whom this kingdom finds repose in such delight and love, that no one's will is bold enough to long for any greater, creating all minds in his own glad sight, as him it pleases, dowers each with grace in divers ways. Here let the fact suffice. And this is clearly and expressly marked for you in Holy Scripture, by those twins who, in their mother, had their wrath aroused. According to the color of the hair of that grace, therefore, must the light supreme be worthily accorded as a crown. Without deserving aught, then, for their deeds, are these to different grades assigned, which differ in their innate keen-sightedness alone. The faith of parents only was, indeed, with innocence, enough for their salvation throughout the centuries of early times. Then, when the primal ages had elapsed, males were by circumcision forced to win the virtue needed by their guileless wings. But later, when the age of grace had come, without the perfect baptism in the Christ, such innocence was there below retained. But now look at the face which to the Christ is most resemblant, for its light alone can make thee ready to behold the Christ.
I saw such gladness raining down on her, borne by those holy minds, created such that they might fly across those altitudes, that whatsoever I had seen before ne'er held me with such admiration poised, nor showed me such resemblance unto God, and that same love which first descended there. Singing, spread out his open wings in front of her. And on all sides the beatific court made such an answer to the song divine, that every face became the more serene. O Holy Father, who for me dost bear to be down here, and leave the pleasant place, where by eternal lot thou hast thy seat. Who is that angel who with such delight is at our Queen's eyes gazing, and is so enamoured that he seems to be on fire? For teaching I had thus recourse again to him who was from Mary drawing beauty, as from the sun the early morning star, and he to me,
As much self-trust and grace as can be in an angel or a soul are all in him, and we would have it so, for he it was who carried down the palm to Mary, when God's Son upon himself was pleased to take the burden of our flesh. But with thine eyes now follow after me, as I keep speaking, and note the great patricians of this most just and kind imperial state. The two that have the happiest seats up there, because the nearest to Augustus' throne, are, as it were, the two roots of this rose. He that upon the left is at her side, that father is, because of whose bold taste the human species tastes such bitterness. And on her right thou seest that ancient father of Holy Church, to whom Christ gave in trust the keys of this fair flower. And he who saw, ere dying, all that fair bride's troubled days, who with the spear and with the nails was won, beside him sits. And at the other side that leader rests, neath whom the ingrate folk, stiff-necked and fickle-minded, lived on manna. Anna thou seest sitting opposite to Peter, so content to see her daughter, that never from her doth she move her eyes, although Hosanna singing. Or 'gainst the oldest father of a family Lucia sits, who had thy lady go, when thou thy brows in downward flight didst turn. But since apace thy slumber time is fleeing, here will we pause, as that good tailor does, who cuts his gown according to his cloth, and toward the primal love direct our eyes, that, looking toward him, thou mayst penetrate as far into his splendor as thou canst. But lest perchance by moving thine own wings thou shouldst recede, believing to advance, grace needs must be obtained for thee by prayer, grace from the one who hath the power to help thee. Hence follow after me with thine affection, that
Section 100 of the Divine Comedy by Dante Alighieri, translated by Courtney Langdon. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Paradiso Canto 33. The Empyrean. God. St. Bernard's Prayer to Mary. The Vision of God. Ultimate Salvation.
O Virgin Mother, daughter of thy Son, humbler and loftier than any creature, eternal counsel's predetermined goal, thou art the one that such nobility didst lend to human nature, that its maker scorned not to make himself what he had made. Within thy womb rekindled was the love, through whose warm influence in the eternal peace this flower hath blossomed thus. Here unto us thou art a noonday torch of charity, and down below among mortal men thou art a living fount of hope. Lady, so great thou art, and hast such worth, that one who longs for grace, and unto thee hath not recourse, wingless would wish to have his longing fly. Not only doth thy kindliness give help to him that asketh it, but many times it freely runs ahead of his request. In thee is mercy, pity is in thee magnificence, and all there is of goodness in a creature meets in thee. Now doth this man, who from the lowest drain of the universe hath one by one beheld, as far as here, the forms of spirit life, beseech thee of thy grace for so much strength that with his eyes he may uplift himself toward ultimate salvation higher still. And I, who never for mine own sight burned more than I do for his, offer thee all my prayers, and pray that they be not too poor, that thou with thy prayers so dissolve each cloud of his mortality, that unto him the highest pleasure may unfold itself. And furthermore, I pray to thee, O Queen, who canst whate'er thou wilt, that after such a sight thou keep all his affections sound. His human promptings let thy care defeat. See with how many blessed ones Beatrice is clasping for my prayers her hands to thee.
The eyes beloved and revered by God, intent on him who prayed, revealed to us how grateful unto her are earnest prayers. Thence they addressed them to the eternal light, wherein it may not be believed the eye of any creature finds so clear a way. And I, who to the end of all desires was drawing near, within me, as I ought, brought to its goal the ardour of desire. Bernard was smiling, and was making signs for me to look on high, but as he wished, I was already of mine own accord, because my sight, as purer it became, was penetrating more and more the radiance of that high light, which of itself is true. From this time onward greater was my sight than is our speech, which yields to such a vision, and memory also yields to such excess. And such as he who seeth in a dream, and after it the imprinted feeling stays, while all the rest returns not to his mind, even such am I. For almost wholly fades my vision, yet the sweetness which was born of it is dripping still into my heart. Even thus the snow is in the sun dissolved, even thus the Sibyl's oracles, inscribed on flying leaves, were lost adown the wind. O light supreme, that dost uplift thyself so far from mortal thought, relend my mind a little of what thou didst seem to be, and cause my tongue to be so powerful, that of thy glory it may leave at least a spark unto the people still to come. For to my memory, if it but a while return, and speak a little in these lines, more of thy victory will be conceived. I think the keenness of the living ray which I endured would have confounded me, if from it I had turned away mine eyes. And I recall that I, because of this, the bolder was to bear it, till I made my vision one with value infinite. O the abundant grace whereby I dared to pierce the light eternal with my gaze, until I had therein exhausted sight. I saw that far within its depths there lies, by love together in one volume bound, that which in leaves lies scattered through the world. Substance and accident, and modes thereof, fused as it were in such a way that that whereof I speak is but one simple light. This union's general form I think I saw, since, saying so, I feel that I the more rejoice. Of more forgetfulness for me one moment is, than centuries 25 are for the enterprise which once caused Neptune to wonder at the shadow Argo cast. My mind, thus wholly in suspense, was gazing steadfast and motionless, and all intent, and gazing grew enkindled more and more. Such in that light doth one at last become, that one can never possibly consent to turn therefrom for any other sight, because the good, which is the will's real object, is therein wholly gathered, and, outside, that is defective which is perfect there. Even as to what I do remember, mine will now be shorter than an infant's speech, who at the breast still bathes his tongue. 'Twas not that there was other than a simple semblance within the living light wherein I gazed, which always is what it hath been before. But through my sight, which in me, as I looked, was gathering strength, because I changed, one sole appearance underwent a change for me. Within the lofty light's profound and clear subsistence there appeared to me 3 rings, of threefold colour and of one content, and one, as rainbow is by rainbow, seemed reflected by the other, while the third seemed like a fire breathed equally from both. Oh, how to my conception short and weak is speech, and this, to what I saw, is such, that it is not enough to call it small. O light eternal, that alone dost dwell within thyself, alone dost understand thyself, and love and smile upon thyself, self-understanding and self-understood. That circle which appeared to be conceived within thyself as a reflected light, when somewhat contemplated by mine eyes, within itself, of its own very colour, to me seemed painted with our human form, whence wholly set upon it was my gaze. Like the geometer who gives himself wholly to measuring the circle, nor by thinking finds the principle he needs, even such was I at that new sight. I wished to see how to the ring the image there conformed itself, and found therein a place. But mine own wings were not enough for this. Had not my mind been smitten by a flash of light, wherein what it was willing came. Here power failed my high imagining, but like a smoothly moving wheel, that love was now resolving my desire and will, which moves the sun and all the other